call our meeting to order this evening. Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided by the board in preparation of the 2022 annual meeting notice, which sets forth the date, time, and place of this meeting, and by properly posting such notice and forwarding the notice to those designated newspapers and persons requesting meeting notices. Please be advised this is a non-smoking building. Fire exits are to my right and your left in the back of the room. This is a scheduled meeting of the planning board. There may be other meetings currently running simultaneously with this meeting. If you're not here from the Summit Planning Board, your meeting may be upstairs or elsewhere in the building. And we might pause here. Chris, we have our stenographer here. Hi, how are you doing? I guess we can go ahead and do our Pledge of Allegiance, and then we'll go back to that. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. So, Chris, maybe you can do the roll call before, or do we need the stenographer here for that?
It'd be preferable to have it.
All right, we'll wait.
I'm
Just
sorry,
wait.
I
No, it's-
was given a different location. Luckily, I figured out that I was not in the right place.
Oh, don't worry about it. Take
So
your
I've
time.
been standing 45 minutes waiting for the door to open somewhere else.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Sorry.
No worries.
Yeah, okay, we'll take your time
It'll
and
be
we'll
2 minutes.
get started whenever you're ready.
Is there a plug to plug in? This isn't plugged in.
Right under your...
Since it's still 50%.
It doesn't look like it's plugged in.
Is it?
Black screen, that's not a good sign, right?
No.
All right, I'll have to do without it.
While we're waiting for a second, did all the board members get a copy of the February 28th meeting minutes?
Yes.
Everybody has those? That's good. It's a long time ago.
There we go. Okay, that's good.
Sounded good?
That's a lot of difference. Okay, and we have a record.
Okay, great.
Good to go.
All right, great, thanks. Then, Chris, will you conduct a roll call?
Certainly. Chairman Anderson.
Present.
Vice Chairman Zucker.
Present.
Councilmember O'Sullivan.
Here.
Ms. Paulson Alvarez is excused. Mr. Brinkerhoff.
Here.
Ms. McNeil.
Here.
Mr. Delory.
Here.
Mr. Fiore is excused. Mr. Formicelli?
Here.
And Mr. Stern is also excused. And for the record, Matt Flynn is here, and he's our board attorney for the night. And you have a quorum. You can proceed.
Thanks, Chris. I'd like to introduce Matt Flynn, who's going to be standing in tonight for Steve Warner. Welcome, Matt. Thank you for pinch hitting for Steve. What we'll know now is that the amount of comments we get back will be about half what we normally receive from Steve, which is very good. Steve is very good, by the way. It's just a joke that we have. Let's go ahead and get started. We'll take a look at the meeting minutes from February 28th. If anybody has any comments. Chris, I think you mentioned that you saw a typo or two here or there.
Yeah. There was one typo I saw where it should be additionally instead of additional.
Okay.
But-
Where is that exactly? Where is it? For that. I read this, I didn't see it. Anyway. All right, so you can make that correction though.
Yeah.
Oh, there it is.
It's in the bottom of page 1.
Yeah, there it is. Yep, okay, great.
Mr. Chairman, I have one other, I think
Yeah,
it's
please,
just a typo
please,
as well.
Jay. Yeah, go ahead.
In the, Chris, in the penultimate paragraph, the last sentence, it says, Mr. Ross also stated the municipal ordinance will determine, it should say if, I believe it says is. It says, is the HPC structured, it should be if.
Got it.
Okay,
Thank you, Jay.
just a look. Thanks.
Thanks. All right, any other comments or additions, deletions? All right, can I have a motion to approve subject to the changes? So moved. And a second?
Second.
All in favor, just a voice vote, Chris?
Yes, sir.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. All right. So I'm going to move the agenda around just a little bit. Aaron Schrager is here, Director of Community Services and our city engineer, and he's going to give us a little overview of the New Jersey Bike and Walk Coalition project that's being contemplated by the city and also by the Summit Conservancy as well. This is a courtesy review, by the way. It's not something that we will have a vote on. Similar to what happens when we receive something from the Board of Education, a school, or something from the Parks Department. It's a similar format. Yeah. Okay, Aaron, thanks. Thanks for being here.
Do you want this on the stenographic record?
Sorry?
Do you want this on the stenographic record?
Yes, yes, thank you. Welcome, Aaron. Thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am Aaron Schrager, the Director of Community Services for the City of Summit, as well as currently serving as the city engineer. Want to speak to you a little bit about what's been commonly called the bike shelter that's being installed at the New Jersey Transit train station downtown. You may be familiar with it a little bit. If not, I'll present a little bit about it. I can give you the history. We have entered year 7 of this project, which is, I guess, a good thing that we're as close as we've ever been. But a little history. In 2015, the engineering division was counting the number of bicycles that were parked at the transit station, and it was quite a bit. We were doing daily surveys. 65, 70 bikes a day was not uncommon on reasonable weather days. Unfortunately, they were parking throughout on the fencing, on signposts, so we started adding bike racks, which were used somewhat, experimented with some portable bike racks, and generally the bikes were just congregating as close as they could along the fencing. So it's a good problem to have. It means you have a community that is using alternate modes of transportation. So one avenue we pursued was Montclair at that time had installed a bike shelter in their parking garage. We went to tour that. We found out that was done through an organization called the New Jersey Bike Walk Coalition. It's njbwc.org for those who want to check that out. They came to Summit, were very excited about the possibility of installing one of these bike shelters in the city, looked at 3 locations, each parking garage and the area that formerly had bike lockers, which is on the north side of the tracks in what's commonly known as the railroad parking lot right there. Those lockers that were there only housed 14 bicycles. They were leased out through Easy Ride, which is a transportation management association. And though they were always, there was a waiting list for them, they were rarely occupied when you opened the locker. So it highlighted the need to have better storage of bicycles. In interviewing a lot of the bike riders, a lot of them had indicated they would do it more frequently, or they would do it if they had a better storage or a locking ability for their bicycles. So we teamed up with New Jersey Bike Walk Coalition, and in March 2016 presented the idea to council, who was favorable of it. In 2017, in December of 2017, the council passed a resolution requesting a formal agreement, since it is New Jersey Transit property. In 2018, we executed that agreement. Took quite a bit of time with New Jersey Transit. And then in 2019, April, we executed the sub-license agreement with New Jersey Bike Walk Coalition to install and then manage the bike shelter. And then in 2019, the city pledged some money. And then in December 2021, the Summit Conservancy came forward with the remaining money to provide the ability to complete the project that we will have now. Pandemic was in there, that hurt fundraising. We assume bikes ridership is going up again, but we are very excited for this project. Looking right now for a start in September. Should go up rather quickly, and then you will be able to lease space through there for your bicycle. You can rent a space. There'll be 32 areas that you could put a bike in. It will be electrified. It'll be a key fob access, and you would go directly through them. They would be managing it. So that's just kind of a basic overview of the whole project. We're excited to see this finally come to fruition. Hoping it gets a lot of use, because in these other towns, Montclair has one, Bloomfield, and also Elizabeth. The biking community then will take part in it, where you could do, lease a bike for a day. So we're hoping it really takes off in that manner. So that's basically the overview of the whole project. So if there's any questions.
As board members, we received it in our packet, an overview of the site plan of where it is, plus I guess a photograph of a rendering of what the project would look like. So with regard to full disclosure, I'm on the board of Seven Conservancy, and so is Jennifer Balson-Alvarez. And I imagine there are a number of people in this audience, as well as board members, that have contributed funding towards this project as well, just in the spirit of full disclosure. I was very happy to see it happen, and I know the bike community is very interested in seeing it happen as well. So any other questions from the board at all with regard to implementation or timing, or?
Is this something that you, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Is this something that you hope will expand? Because you said you get as many as 60 or 70 rights, and you're providing for 32 in this phase of the project. So is this something that 32 will be enough, or you think you'll want to do more?
I think it will be enough for now. I think it'll actually fill up slowly as the word gets out and then people realize it's a better option, but I think we could expand it. And we would love to expand to the parking garages. We just have a worry, and we've witnessed it, that the further away it is, as this sounds kind of ironic, that cyclists they'll bike 12 miles, but that last 50 feet, they want to be as close as possible. So because it would have been far easier to go in our garages, because we own those. But from what we see, we'd be worried that they wouldn't get any use. So yeah, very, very likely we could expand it, whether you expand that one or just do a second one. So ideally, it would be without transit. That's not a knock on them. It's just another agency that you have to get approvals from. But I would think it would take off once ridership goes up.
Thank you, Aaron. Thanks for that. How will the rental work? Will it be monthly?
It is monthly. They have a set pricing program. It is on their website currently. Not for Summit, because we're still in development, but you could look at Montclair, and you would pay them directly. They manage it, so they'll track it that way.
And you would think ours would be similar pricing?
Yes. So.
One of the features it'll have is it'll have a little bit of a bike racking kind of thing, where if you need to change a sprocket or a tire or something like that, it's a little bit of a bike stand that you can do that. There'll be some tools, as I understand it, in there that are sort of on strings, so the tools don't walk away. And there's, I think, an electric charging station in there for people who have electric bikes.
There will be electricity for that,
So
yes.
it's going to be kind of interesting. It's all glass, and we know that there are people that have bikes that are very expensive, that cost a lot more than my very first car, I'm sure. So some of those bikes are expensive, and people want to be sure that they're well secured, so that's why the key fob is necessary for people to get in and out there. And it's basically all it's not glass, but a plexiglass Lexan type
Correct.
enclosure, so it's completely visible on all four sides. Yeah.
Right, and we're hoping, and we're sure it will, but, 7 years ago they were on board, but the local bike shops will then run programs like they do in the other towns, so it's essentially, if your bike needs service, they'll have access where they can go get your bike while you're at work, and then they'll fix it, return it, or do a loaner program. So there's lots of opportunities we could work with here. We just need to get it built, and then we could definitely expand on it more.
Yep.
And I think to your credit, if you build it, they will come. I think once it's up and running, programs, and then the use will go up quite a bit.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Well, Aaron, thanks very much. Appreciate you taking time out of your evening to come and tell us about it, and we're excited to see it go up, and I'm sure it'll be well used.
Very good, thank you.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thanks, Aaron.
So we have a couple of public hearings tonight, we'll start with the first public hearing is with Fafsa Real Estate LLC. Begin there this evening.
Before we begin, I will say that I had an opportunity to review the notice and the affidavits of service and publication. They're legally sufficient and they were served timely, so the board does have jurisdiction to hear the application.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Attorney Rosemary Stone Dougherty with the law firm of Jabber, Bound and Borgap, here tonight on behalf of the applicant, Vassar Real Estate LLC. We're here tonight for a minor subdivision for the property known as Block 2802, Lot 15, in the R15 zone known commonly as 2 High Street. Just to give the board a little bit of an overview, this application was originally submitted over a year ago, and when it was originally submitted without any housing plans, because at that point in time, the applicant was looking to simply go forward with the minor subdivision and hadn't developed a house yet that they were going to build for his mother. My applicant is here with me tonight. The principal is Mr. Sal Garcia, who's here in the back row, and his mother is here with him. The house that is being designed is still in the design stages, but we were asked by the city to provide some type of sample house with building footprint to show the board that a house could be built on the property as subdivided. So the plans that were submitted do not represent the single-story ranch-style house that my client intends to construct on the property, but instead were provided at the request of the city to show really kind of how big of a house could be built if the applicant was looking to build one large house, which is not their intent. You'll hear that in the testimony this evening. But with that being said, I'd like to start with our engineer, Mr. Mike. Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead, Mike. Just say your last name and spell it for the stenographer.
Michael Lanzafama, that's Lanzafama.
And if we could have him sworn in, Counsel?
Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth throughout the course of this hearing?
I do.
Great.
Again, Michael Lanzafama. I'm principal with the firm of Casey and Keller Incorporated, 258 Main Street, Millburn, New Jersey. I'm licensed as a professional land surveyor, engineer, and planner. I've been so licensed since 1984. I hold a Bachelor of Science degree in Civil and Environmental Engineering from New Jersey Institute of Technology. I've testified before this board and the zoning board on numerous occasions.
Thank you, Mr. Lanzafama, for their qualifications. The board members have any questions of this witness regarding his qualifications? All right. Well, welcome back, Mr. Lanzafama.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And just to be clear, we intend to have him testify in dual capacity as both a professional engineer and professional planner here this evening, and all your licenses are current as of this evening.
They are.
Okay. Can you walk the board through the application that has been submitted?
Certainly. What I'm first going to bring up on the screen is a copy of the survey that was prepared by our office of the existing property. The property in question is 2 High Street. It is tax lot 15 in block 2802. It is in the R15 zone district. It's an exceptionally oversized parcel of land at 64,549 square feet, or about 1.5 acres, in a zone that is typically required to be 15,000 square feet and 18,000 square feet for corner lots. So it's nearly 3.6 times the size of the minimum zoning standard. The property is rectangular in shape. It sits on the northwest corner of the intersection of High Street and Prospect Street. The property has 271.78 feet of frontage along High Street and 233.53 feet of frontage along Prospect Street. The property is currently occupied by an existing single-family home. On the north side of the home is a 3-car garage, which is accessed from an existing driveway off of High Street. This driveway then runs across the front of the home and then ties back to Prospect Street, giving it full access from both street frontages. There is a pool and patio area to the rear of the home. The home is currently fully compliant with regard to all of the bulk standards as to setback, coverage, FAR, and building height. The topography of the site is such that it slopes moderately from the southeast corner, which is the intersection of High and Prospect, to the northwest corner at the far corner of the site. It changes in grade of about 20 feet over a distance of 350 feet. So it's moderately sloping. It's less than a 6% slope overall. The property is not impacted by steep slopes, wetlands, or flood hazard area. And it currently is screened significantly by a series of evergreen trees, arborvitae, rhododendron, and a number of different shrubs that provide a well-screened streetscape from both Prospect as well as High Street. I would like to bring up an exhibit that we prepared as part of our preparation for tonight's hearing. Okay, great. Oh, there you go.
And was this provided to the board ahead of time?
It was not.
Okay.
So this is
And
an
I have
exhibit that we
paper
prepared
copies for board members.
in preparation for tonight's hearing. And we could mark this as Exhibit A1 if you choose.
Great. And labeled how?
It's an aerial image of the neighborhood compiled by my office through the use of software known as Near Maps. And this image is taken from an aerial image produced by that software in March of 2021. And what it depicts, it shows Prospect Street across the center portion of the exhibit, High Street moving down the center. North is to the top of the page, and the property in question is outlined in red. You can see the existing structure and pool behind the existing structure, and the adjoining properties taken from tax map information are depicted in the yellow lines. So you can see that there's a variety of lot sizes in the area. It's not a cookie cutter type subdivision that, you know, we typically saw done in the 50s and 60s. This is certainly property that has evolved over time. As a matter of fact, the subject property was part of a much larger parcel at one time, and this is now the remnant parcel. So what we did is, as you're aware, within your ordinance, not only do we have to meet the minimum standard for the R15 zone, which is 15,000 square feet and a lot width of 90 feet, and corner lots have to be 18,000 square feet. What we also have to do is we have to analyze what is called neighborhood character. And to determine what the neighborhood character is through averaging, what the ordinance says is you're to analyze the 3 lots to your left, the 3 lots to your right, and 3 lots directly across the street. Now, I consulted with Krista Anderson on this because we have an unusual situation here. We have a corner lot, and to determine which lots we were to use for the proposed lots we are presenting this evening, Chris and I determined that probably the best course of action was for what would become the interior lot with the existing house. We would use the 3 lots immediately to the north and the 3 lots directly across the street. And for the new lot, which we're creating for the new single-family home, we would use the 3 lots immediately to the left or to the west, and the 3 lots directly across the street, across Prospect to the south. And in doing that analysis, we can determine what the neighborhood average is as to lot area, lot width, and then also determine the average front yard setback for both of the proposed lots. Now, what we found in our analysis with the lots that are associated with proposed lot 15.01 or the interior lot that houses the existing structure, we determined that the average lot area was 24,986 square feet, and that the average lot width was 107.22 feet, with a required minimum front yard setback of 54.2 feet. As to the new corner lot that we're creating at the intersection of Prospect and High, what we found the averages to be is 29,288 square feet for the lot area, 110.67 feet for the lot width, with an average front yard setback of 41.8 feet. Now, the proposal seeks to preserve the character of the existing neighborhood and at the same time allow for the introduction of this single-family home into the neighborhood. And the new home would be able to conform to all of the bulk standards with regard to setback, height, coverage, floor area ratio, and the like. All utilities are readily available from both Prospect and High Street to continue to service the existing structure and to service the new structure. The subdivision itself, the proposal that we are presenting, take a look at sheet 2 in your site subdivision plat that was submitted as part of the application, and that gives you a clear understanding of the lot and the new lot that we are proposing. As you can see from the exhibit, which is sheet 2 in your plan set, we're calling lot 15.01 the lot with the existing house, and we're calling the lot that we're creating for the new house lot 15.02. To confuse matters a little bit, Krista points out that the tax assessor has already identified for her, if the subdivision were approved, what the lot numbers would be. And it turns out, of course, the tax assessor said the existing house would remain lot 15, and the proposed lot would be 15.01. Just so there's no confusion when you're looking at Krista's memo. When she refers to 15.01, it's 15.02 on the subdivision plans that were submitted. So, as I stated, the proposal is to create the 2 lots, 15.01, the house with the existing, the lot with the existing house would be 41,795 square feet with a lot width of 176.3 feet. Lot 15.02 would be 22,754 square feet. If you use the minimum standards within the ordinance, obviously we're well compliant, well above the 18,000 square feet required for a corner lot. But if you use the averaging that we've developed, we would need a variance of 6,534 square feet. Now, within the ordinance, when it talks about lot averaging, when it deals with the front yard setback, what it typically states is that if you have a setback that's more than 2.5 times the minimum standard for the zone, you should exclude it from your analysis. And if you take a look at the analysis that we prepared on the plan that you have before you, we did a table that outlines the lot averaging. And you can see that we have, obviously, for the two lots, we have a different analysis because we're dealing with different lots. So lot 15.01, which is the lot with the existing house on it, is fully compliant. We do have a few oddities in there. If you look at 11 High Street, the lot area is 43,704 square feet, which is over an acre in size. But more importantly, if you look at the average for the Prospect Street parcel, which is lot 15.02, you see that we have two lots that are more than twice what is the minimum for the zone. 123 Prospect Street, which is the parcel immediately to the west of our site, is over 50,000 square feet. And 14 Prospect Street, which is directly across the street from this parcel, is 38,602 square feet. So if we excluded those two on the same concept of excluding lots that are 2.5 times the front yard setback from the average setback determination, the lot area would come out to, the average would come out to 21,756 square feet, which would make our lot compliant. The lot width for the Prospect Street lot will be 236.71 feet along the Prospect Street frontage, which is compliant. However, because we're a corner lot, we have to meet the minimum lot width standard on both street frontages. So the street frontage, the street width, or the lot width along the High Street frontage, it calculates out to be 92.73 feet. So we would need a variance of 14.49 feet. So as part of the subdivision, what's important is that the applicant is trying to maintain the character of the area to the greatest degree possible while introducing the opportunity for a new home in the property. And there, as part of this, the driveway access that connects to Prospect, we would like to retain. And we would do that legally through an easement. An easement would be granted to the property owner of 15.01 that would allow access or allow the positioning of the driveway to remain through 15.02. That triggers a number of variances. Within your ordinance, we're required to have a 2-foot setback from any property line with the driveway. Well, in this particular case, the driveway crosses the property line, so you have 0 setback. It's kind of a technicality, but it's something that has to be addressed in the proofs and in the variances being sought. The second item is that a circular driveway is permitted within the zone if you have a minimum frontage of 125 feet. We have an excess of 125 feet of our frontage along High Street. But Ms. Anderson, in her review, indicated that in her mind, this was not a circular driveway because it exited out to a separate street. Back in, I believe it's 2008, if I'm not mistaken, there was a variance granted to allow this driveway to exist in its current location. But because we are now modifying the lots, we would have to reestablish the proofs for that variance to continue to permit that driveway to exit onto Prospect Street. And the backstory and a very important aspect of this whole application is that when Mr. Garcia came to my office about buying this property, and his first inclination to me was, I want to move my mother and my grandfather into an adjoining house. Can I put a second house, a small house, on this property without a variance? My reaction was no. You can't have two principal structures on a property. Your best avenue would be to propose a subdivision and build a house. It wasn't until we got into the weeds with the averaging that we realized that we still would need a variance. But I think the variances being sought are probably a better planning alternative than the second principal use on the lot. So the purpose of building the house and the effort to place it where we have placed it was an effort to minimize potential site impacts. There are a number of existing trees around the perimeter of the property. We anticipate that 6 to 7 trees would have to come down to facilitate the construction of the home and the construction of the access drive to Prospect Street. And many of the trees that are in the location of the driveway to Prospect are not in great shape. They're evergreen trees that are in distress, and taking them down wouldn't significantly impact the area in my mind. An additional variance that was identified in the review memos was that the area immediately in front of the house, let me blow that up, provides for the ability to place an additional car in front of the front door of the house. I believe it's section 35-14.2G8, which talks about parking for residential properties. And you need to have at least a 2-car garage for every residential property in the city of Summit. But what they also allow you to do, you can park up to 200% of what the residential site improvement standards require for a home of this size. This is a 5-bedroom home. Under the residential site improvement standards, we would be required to have 3 parking spaces. So that means we could park up to 6 cars on the property without the need for a variance. We have a 3-car garage. Immediately to the north of the garage, there's an additional parking area for 3 additional spaces. So that is the 6 that we're entitled to. The 2 additional spaces that might exist in front of the front door is an existing non-conforming condition. Because we're modifying the lot, there is some question as to whether or not a variance would be needed for that. There's also variances that were cited because of where we placed the patio behind the proposed home and the fact that there's an existing retaining wall that crosses the property line. The patio area will be made compliant. We're not asking for a variance for the patio. The retaining wall and 2 steps that exist that encroach on proposed lot 15.02, that would be modified so that encroachment would not exist. So we're not seeking those 2 variances as part of our application this evening. We would say to the board that we would amend the plan to make sure that there would be no patio within 15 feet of the property line as required by the zoning ordinance. Looking at the zoning table, if you look at the data that is presented here, you can see that there are full compliance with all of the bulk standards that exist within the zone. My computer will cooperate. So you can see, other than the lot size for lot 15.02 and the lot width along the High Street frontage. Those are the two variances that we are seeking with regard to the subdivision proposal that we are presenting this evening. The front setbacks would be compliant, the side yard setbacks would be compliant, the combined side yard would be compliant, building height would be compliant, building coverage would be compliant, lot coverage would be compliant, and so would the floor area ratio. So you can see that the real issues at hand for the subdivision we're proposing are lot width, lot area, and the maintaining of the driveway from lot 15.01 through lot 1502 to Prospect Street. We have a number of memos that we did receive from the professional. There was nothing in those memos that we could not comply with. I believe through my testimony, we will be addressing the proofs shortly with regard to the variances that we are seeking, which, by the way, in my opinion, are all C2 variances, that the benefits outweigh the detriments, that these are good planning alternatives for this area and this property.
So Mike, just for clarity though, the memorandum from Colliers dated July 13th, 2022, we can comply with all of those comments, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and then as far as the planning memorandum that was done by Mr. Burgess's office dated July 21, 2022, you're going to go through a little bit more in your planning testimony, correct?
That's correct. All right, moving into the planning testimony, and as I stated.
Before we do that, I think I'll swear in our professionals just in case they have comments on their own memorandum. So we both raise your right hand. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give during the course of this hearing will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Great.
We'll have our board professionals ask questions. The board will then ask questions, and we'll open it up to the public to see if they have any questions of this witness.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, as I stated, in my opinion, I believe that all of these variances that we are seeking fall under the C2 criteria of the municipal land use law. The purpose of the municipal land use law would be to be advanced by a deviation from the zoning ordinance requirements, and the benefits of the deviation would outweigh any detriments, which is often referred to as a better planning alternative. As far as the positive criteria goes, I see this application advancing A. In my mind, this will promote the general welfare. And why do I say that? How does this advance the general welfare? Well, as we know, there's a state master plan, and the city of Summit is located in the PA1 area, which is area where infrastructure already exists, mass transportation exists, and that the proposal would be consistent with the effort by the state master plan to promote development in those types of areas. Because this application would provide the opportunity to create quality housing stock within regions where infrastructure and mass transportation already exist. I also see this advancing E, to promote the establishment of appropriate population densities and concentrations that will contribute to the well-being of persons, neighborhoods, and communities. G, to provide sufficient space and appropriate locations for residential uses. I think this is an ideal opportunity for what's often referred to as infill development. And to promote a desirable visual environment through creative development techniques and good civic design standards. What we're attempting to do here is preserve the streetscape, and in a few moments I'll show you another exhibit that I prepared. And we're really trying to make every effort to literally tuck this house into an open lawn panel that exists behind the heavily landscaped street frontages of Prospect and High Street. As far as the negative criteria goes, what we have to demonstrate is that the variance can be granted without substantial detriment to the public good, and it will not substantially impair the intent and purpose of the zone plan or the zoning ordinance. In my mind, this provides for new housing opportunities without the need for new infrastructure. The new home will meet all of the bulk requirements, thereby providing adequate light, air, and open space to adjoining properties. The variance associated with the driveway is an effort to preserve the streetscape along High Street. In my mind, we're not substantially impairing the intent and purpose of the zone plan. The new lot will fit nicely within the neighborhood fabric and will not be out of character with the area. Every effort will be made to fit the home within the open area of the site with a minimal loss of trees. We believe that we are promoting one of the goals cited in the city's master plan, and that is goal number 1, to guide development, not to prevent development, but to guide development to maintain and enhance the character of Summit. The proposal permits the development of this oversized property while making every effort to maintain the streetscape and the neighborhood character. So to support that claim, I'd like to just bring up a further exhibit that we prepared. Okay, let's see if we're going to have a problem with this guy. There we go. There we go. Excuse me. This is a series of photographs taken by myself last Friday at the property. This would be Exhibit A2.
And council, I guess we would just title it Photo Board.
Okay.
Photo Board 1, and the photographs were taken July 22nd, 2022. And what we see, let's zoom in on the top photographs here. If you look at the top 3 photographs, I tried to do a panorama, but I wasn't too successful. You see the little street light that's there? That light exists right at there's a walkway that comes out right to High Street at a location just on the southeast corner of the property. So it gives you a sense. You cannot see the existing house from the street. And this is the full extent of High Street, from the furthest northern point of the property to the intersection of Prospect to the left. Then looking at the photos at the bottom of the page, we misnumbered them. Photo 2 is actually photo 4, is where the existing driveway comes out to Prospect. You can see how it just kind of fits into the streetscape with a minimal amount of intrusion and disturbance of the landscape area. The next 2 photographs are the open lawn panel in which we attempt to construct the home. One is looking downhill from closer to High Street down parallel to Prospect, and the last image on the lower right-hand corner is looking uphill, which would be the location of the garage of the house and the driveway area. And as you can see, there's a vast amount of space that is available to construct a single-family home in that area. As Rosemary pointed out, Mr. Garcia had contracted with an architect, Dan Duvernay, to develop a house which really kind of fit into the space. What we wanted to demonstrate to the board, as the attorney pointed out at the start of the hearing, was that even though this lot was non-conforming as to area and lot width, we can easily get a house in there that would meet all of the setback requirements, meet the building height, coverage, FAR. So you could develop the property. There's no physical constraint to developing the property in a way that would be consistent with your R15 zoning standards with regard to setback, building coverage, and other bulk standards. So in conclusion, this was an application that evolved over time, And I feel very strongly that this would be a benefit to the community. It certainly would help the Garcia family to stay close, stay connected. But we realize that over time, things do change. So that's why we're here this evening, to present to the board the rationale, so that if things changed in the future, it wouldn't be a detriment to the community. That's all I have, and I'll be happy to answer questions you might have.
Given how complicated this is in some ways, maybe it's better to hear from our board professionals first before we have questions from the board members. Maybe Joe or Chris, you could walk through your memos and see where there are issues or concerns.
Certainly. Hi, Mike, how are you?
I'm good.
Just a few questions.
Sure.
When you went through the surrounding development arrangement, you talked about some larger, oversized lots,
Correct.
but nothing equal to or larger than this single-family lot of 1.51 acres.
Right. This was the single largest lot in the area.
Okay. And when you say in the area, are you talking about just the way the ordinance has measured the area for the purposes of the average, or a broader area than that?
No, we looked at it based upon, let me get this open. Based upon, well, I looked at the blocks involved. There's a block that goes from Prospect, what I have up on the TV screen now is Exhibit A1. It goes from High Street to Prospect to Pine Grove Avenue up to Springfield Avenue. And if you look in that general area, you see that we are the single biggest lot in that area. And if you look across Prospect, to the south side of Prospect, we are clearly the biggest lot in that area. And again, on the east side of High Street, all the way to Blackburn Road, we are clearly the largest lot in that area.
Okay. You had said one thing that I found somewhat troublesome. And that's not
Just
that.
one thing, Joe?
Well, we'll get into others later. But when you started to talk about a better zoning alternative, and you specifically talked about how the comparison for better zoning alternative in this case is what's being proposed versus providing two houses on one lot. Now, that's not my understanding of the test. The better zoning alternative is if the proposed plan, standing on its own merits, is a better zoning alternative for the neighborhood and the public good. Could you get into that a little bit?
Sure, that was my intent. The backstory about the history, I thought was important. It's not, you're right, it's not related to the planning proofs. The planning proofs here are simply the opportunity to take an oversized lot and create another lot for good quality housing in an area where infrastructure and mass transportation exists. And that the lot we're proposing is not really out of character with the neighborhood. That when you take out the anomalies of 123 Prospect and 114 Prospect, we're actually compliant.
Could you talk a little bit about the driveway that extends over both lots?
Yes.
Because that is not permitted by code. Maybe you should talk about how that represents a better zoning alternative or
Yeah,
not.
again, if, what I was trying to relate is, when you talk about a better planning alternative, you see the existing lot here. We could take the driveway that currently exists on lot 15.01, where the existing house is, turn it into High Street, keep it on the same parcel, meet the 2-foot setback. We have more than 125 feet, so we would meet the standard. But what that would do, in my mind, if you look at the streetscape in Exhibit A2, specifically photos 2 and 3, you would destroy much of that landscaping there, thereby changing the character of the streetscape and exposing the house to view from the street. In my mind, keeping what's there is the better planning alternative.
Okay, so you're suggesting that adding a 15 or so foot wide driveway, second driveway onto High Street would be that damaging to the established character?
Yeah, if you look at the existing vegetation that's there, it would remove a significant number of mature trees. One of the enticements of buying this property was its secluded nature, and they want to maintain it. And I think the community wants to maintain it. So the introduction of a new driveway onto High Street, in my mind, is not better than maintaining the status quo of the existing condition.
Could we talk about that a little bit then? Because if you were to establish a conforming condition, wouldn't you also be eliminating a second driveway on Prospect?
Yes, we would, but we have enough frontage on Prospect to put in two driveways if we decided to put in a circular driveway.
You talked a little bit about the negative criteria in terms of aesthetic enhancements. Actually, you use that for both positive and negative criteria. But we haven't seen a particular house to talk about that visual enhancement.
Well,
So
the
help me
aesthetics
with that.
I'm talking about is the preservation of the vegetation along the streetscapes. And by maintaining that, in my mind, that's providing for a benefit aesthetically along the streetscape. So the house, we're hoping no one ever sees the homes. Our goal is to maintain that vegetation along the streetscape, just take out enough vegetation to get a driveway in, and nestle that new home in that open lawn panel behind the existing vegetation.
So to ensure the retention of all that vegetation, are you talking about a restriction against removing vegetation unless it's diseased or whatever?
Well, we do have to take some trees out, obviously, for the driveway. Right now, I'm estimating about 6 trees would have to come down as a result of the construction of the home and the driveway. Most of it is due to the construction of the driveway. My client's intention is to preserve the trees. Until we get to a point where we've actually laid out the house and actually finalized the footprint, it's up to him as to whether or not he wants to consider that restriction on the property.
Yeah, but if that's the focus of the rationale for the relief, what assurance does the board have that those trees and all that vegetation is going to be retained? Because a week after the board approves this, all that could be removed then.
I hear you. I believe our attorney wants to respond.
She might want to.
Yes, my client has no problem stipulating to a restriction to preserve the trees and the streetscape on both corner lot properties as indicated. The trees that are proposed to be removed are more interior trees in the area of where the driveway is proposed. So if by any chance any trees did become diseased or something of that nature, the applicant would certainly replace them. I think my applicant is more concerned about the trees in a lot of respects than most average applicants, so we have no problem stipulating to that.
Okay. I think one last question. In our memo, we questioned whether or not with the new house there would be a basement or not. Do you know?
I believe the intention would be to have a basement, but we don't know for sure.
Okay. And I think, on any exterior mechanical equipment, AC?
Yeah, there would be AC equipment outside.
So that will be screened pursuant to?
Yeah, we would be fully compliant with the ordinance as well.
Nothing else?
Okay. Mr. Dorr?
I think most of my questions have been answered, but Mr. Wazafama said that they would provide all the information as far as the dry wells and some of the comments I made on the existing property. The proposed property said is going to be compliant with all the bulk requirements, and it would also have to meet all the stormwater requirements, screening of
We would
mechanical,
stipulate that,
discussed,
yeah.
and everything else. And Mr. Wazafama also did mention that one of the questions was regarding eliminating that driveway and turning it so that it did come out on High Street. And you mentioned, correct me if I'm wrong, that it's engineeringly it's possible from the aesthetic standpoint, the applicant does not want to do that.
That's correct.
I have no further questions, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Any of the board members have questions for this witness or questions of our consultants? Jay?
It looks like John is
No,
about
John,
to.
I'm sorry, John, you go ahead. I was looking the other way.
Oh, sure. All right, I'll go first. Hi, I'm Mr. Lanzafano. A couple of things. You offered testimony that this was the largest lot in the block. Could I draw your attention to the area map with the 200-foot circle around the property? And I would point to lot 20 and block 2802.
Let me get there.
To the left of on the left side of the circle. You just had it.
My computer's a little slow this evening. My apologies. Why it's not coming up. There we go. There we go. Sorry. I believe you're talking about lot 20.
I am.
Yes, that is about it's actually, when I calculated the lot area, it was actually a little bit less. It came out, we're 65,456 square feet, I believe I said. This calculated out to be just about 65,000 square feet.
Even though
And
the,
actually, this was lots 20, 12, 11, 13, 14, 16, 17, and 15 were originally all one tract of land. That was broken up over time.
I understand, but are you saying that the city of Summit's calculation is wrong? It's not 1.58? Okay.
Could be. Some of the deeds read to the center line of the road. We don't include that when we're doing subdivision calculations.
On that subject, you offer testimony that the code allows, for purposes of disregarding outliers on setback, you can disregard some, but you asked us to apply that to lot area. Does the code actually suggest that you can disregard the larger lots
No,
when calculating area?
I'm suggesting that you could do that, that's a reasonable rationale for accounting for outliers. So, in my mind, we're seeking the variance, we're not saying we're compliant.
Okay.
We're seeking the variance.
I'm just looking for the reasoning, the justification.
Well, I was just taking the logic that the ordinance applied to setback. Actually, Chris and I had this conversation, and my question to her was, well, then why can't we apply that to lot area and lot width? Which is, I don't know. That's a good question to raise, so I'm raising it.
Okay, and thank you. And with regard to your request on the easement, judging from your submissions, it looks like the easement severs the yard in half of the new proposed lot.
It's the front yard area.
Okay.
It's the area between where the house would be constructed and High Street.
Right. Oh, that's
That's technically a front yard.
okay. Even the house faces Prospect, though.
The house would face Prospect.
Okay. All right. But this is the large area. It's the lawn area that the house would enjoy if they wanted to play volleyball or do anything. That's the open space that they would enjoy.
Yeah, that is an area. There also is opportunity behind the house as well, depending upon what the final footprint of the house took on.
Oh.
And also, the desire here is to have the person who's living in the house connect to the main house, that there is a relationship there, at least for the present time.
Right, but we have to think about
The future,
the
yes.
future and the lot, and I'm wondering why having basically your only usable lawn severed in half by someone else's driveway is a better planning alternative than losing a couple of evergreens to do a street cut on High Street.
Well, it's not just moving a couple of evergreens. That's what I was trying to depict in the photographs I presented. If you go there and you walk the streetscape, it's amazing how well that area is screened out. You don't even notice that the house is there. And they really don't want to lose that privacy.
Yeah, I've walked it many times, I understand, yes. I'm sorry, but again, when someone's looking to buy that property, do you think that's an attractive, having that
Well,
bifurcated
they would
easement?
take that into consideration in the value of the property.
Yeah, I guess
It might
that's it.
diminish the value slightly, yes. Like any easement, that might affect the property.
Okay. Someone else?
Yep. Who else? Go ahead, Jay.
I'm going to, on the same line of reasoning about this driveway, unusual driveway situation.
Yes.
The new house will have its own driveway off Prospect Street.
That's
at the
correct.
western end of the site. Is a circular drive required for the existing house with the driveway off High Street? My impression is, and I was there today and have been by there a million times, you could simply, you don't need a circular drive, you don't need a second access point on High Street
Well, it does
to
allow
serve
you,
to serve soccer.
it does allow you to pull up to the front of the house, drop visitors off, whatever, and then pull right out. It is convenient, it's convenient.
It's a but it's only convenient because you could continue to do that even if the driveway ended at the property line. If we create a new property line, you'd have to back out, admittedly.
Yeah, you'd have to
You'd have to
back down that area.
Right. But that's a short distance. It's sort of the width of the house, rather than having what I think we've all identified. I mean, Mr. Burgess has, and I suspect the others would have if they hadn't jumped in ahead of them, and a very unusual situation. So it seems to me, is that necessary, or is that a good planning result, is what I'm questioning. But, so.
Well-
And then, well, I should give you a chance to respond. Sorry.
Well, in our mind, it's important to have the second means of egress. If you're trying to get there, my computer's about to lose power. So you have that front area in front of the house. You would have to back down. It is a little bit of a peculiar maneuver to come around into there to be able to pull out onto High Street. But to allow this to come forward, it is really a much easier and much more convenient maneuver.
It's a trade, it's a convenience, but in exchange for that, there's a detriment that I think I'm at least the third person to identify. So I think that needs to be considered. And now, secondly, this is a more general comment and question. As I understand what you're trying to accomplish here, and I admire the fact that you're trying to maintain the landscaping, which is very attractive.
Yes.
Say. However, sitting here without a landscape plan, with the notion that the house we've been shown and we spent time looking at is not going to build, how can we proceed? Wouldn't that go a long way towards allowing us to get comfortable with this? If I had a landscape plan in combination with the stipulation that your attorney has offered, which is appropriate. But what are we stipulating to keep the landscaping? That's just not specific, or it's insufficiently specific for us, in my opinion, to proceed with, well, we're going to keep the landscaping. A plan with the trees identified would certainly would help me substantially.
The survey provided shows all the existing vegetation, all the major trees with their size. A landscape plan wouldn't tell you anything more. A landscape plan is what we would do to augment what's there. We're trying not to need to augment. We're trying to minimize the number of trees to be removed and fit the house nicely in this open lawn panel that currently exists on the site. We anticipate taking down these 5 trees right in through here, as well as 2 trees at the street to allow for getting the driveway.
But pardon me, how do I know which ones of those you're keeping? You just told me you're going to take down 5 of them. How would I possibly know that looking at this?
You're looking at the plan that shows the proposed house. It shows you which trees fall in the driveway. Those trees are the ones you would take down.
And those that are on that plan will remain.
Everything else is proposed to remain.
And is that the sum and substance of the landscaping that's on the property today?
Yes. The only thing we haven't shown is like small bushes and things of that sort. But that's all the major vegetation.
All I have now, Mr. Chairman.
Losing my
Okay,
battery.
else have any questions?
I just again, back to the driveway, I'm not sure I really understand the need for the driveway exiting out onto Prospect Street if they have the driveway that comes from High Street and connects to the additional driveway there. Is that correct? Is that what you said, right? There's additional 3 parking spots on the side of the house?
Correct.
So,
Opposite the garage.
okay, so my question is, I'm still not really understanding why the need for that driveway to remain bisecting the proposed new lot. What exactly are they expecting to accomplish? Just a convenience to have that
It's a
second?
convenience, yes, it's convenience, it creates a safer condition, rather than having to back down the driveway to make the K-turn to exit onto High Street. It's existed in this condition for probably more
Right.
than 15, 16 years now.
Right.
It
But there was no other house there, so.
No other house there before, correct.
So you talk about safety, how safe is it then for, if at some point other people are living in that house and that driveway is bisecting, cutting through their yard, how safe is that for them?
Well, it's their...
I mean, you raised the question of safety, so it's just,
Right. No, I understand. It's not an area where the people would necessarily relax in. It's a front yard area. So we had envisioned that they would use the area behind the house or to the west of the house. It's something that we have to evaluate and consider. We wanted to bring it to the board. I think maybe the attorney wants to say a few words about that.
Well, Mike, I was also just going to follow up with that. Some of the things when you originally met with the client and you looked at many other ways that you could potentially carve up this property, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at your Exhibit A1, you can see as the design changed over time, how some of these lot lines have been skewed in a way to allow certain development to occur. Is that a fair comment?
Yes.
And one of the things in regards to the driveway is the easement itself is not a legal detriment. That is an option that the client could have. That is an option the client could do after a property was subdivided. That wouldn't require any board approval with the exception of curb cuts and things of that nature if it was a shared driveway, correct?
Correct.
And that was one of the things you looked at as well, as possibly a shared driveway with only one curb cut. But looking at an eye towards the future and realizing the status quo doesn't always remain the status quo, opted to do a secondary dedicated driveway just for the new proposed house, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, one of the other arguments I believe that you had mentioned during our initial discussions was, besides the convenience factor, having that additional curb cut that comes out onto Prospect also allows an additional way for ambulance or any other types of services to get to the property right up to the front because of all that extremely mature vegetation and not being able to see the house from the streetscape as well.
Yes, well, we talked about safety as one of the elements involved in the need for the driveway and the desire for the driveway. As I said, it is a convenience item, but it has some element of safety and security for the homeowner.
Now, again, the plan that was provided for the house, to go to Board Member Brinkerhoff's comment, was done because for a minor subdivision, a house plan was not an initial requirement for the submission, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. It's not a checklist item, but in going through the items, it was something that was requested with the understanding of show us really kind of how large of a potential home the applicant may potentially build, not with the direction of show us the modest single-story family dwelling that the applicant is planning on building for his mother.
Yeah, in conversations with Krista Anderson, we felt that it might be important to demonstrate that a house could be built on the property without the need for setback or other bulk variances, as I testified to earlier.
And part of that rationale too was to also show a two-story house, even though a single story is proposed, because in the future, if somebody came along and purchased the lot and they wanted to go up, it would give the board a better idea of how large of a structure could potentially be on the site, correct? So again, it wasn't meant to mislead the board, it was meant to give the board all the information for future development of the site, so that the board could get a better handle on what could possibly be there if approved and built up over time, rather than just show the small single-family, one-story ranch that's being proposed for his mother.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions from board members?
Can I go back to that
Sure,
question?
Go ahead. I've got a few now, but you go ahead.
I'm a little confused as to why you wouldn't show us the house you're planning to build.
They haven't
Bec-
designed it yet.
But even just,
They tried to, what we tried to do was, as the attorney pointed out, was show the board a house, a reasonably sized house that could fit on the lot and not require any variances. We didn't want to come in with some postage stamp house that the board might think we were trying to pull the wool over their eyes or whatever. So we tried to devise and design a house that we might want to build, but most likely it would not be to this extent. Right now, the house we're showing has a second floor with additional bedrooms. We probably would not do that. Most likely, obviously it's going to be a one-story structure with master bedroom on the main living level.
just out of curiosity, have you checked Prospect to see if there are other houses of that style and that size? Is that conforming to the style of the neighborhood homes in terms of size?
I didn't do an analysis of the neighboring homes.
Board members with questions? Yes, yeah, Matthew.
Thank you, Chairman. Number one, when this gets plowed, where will the snow go? Will it fall onto the property in which the new lot, when this existing,
It'll stay on its own lot, yeah.
meaning when this existing driveway that severs the lot is
The
plowed?
driveway that exists,
Yes.
they could plow it into lot 1502.
And are you-
Keep it on the same lot.
Okay, so it will remain in the driveway. How will they clear the snow out of there?
They just plow it up through the lot and push it towards the
Coming back way into, okay. And are you aware of any other properties in Summit in which someone else's driveway completely severs a lot in two?
Not that I can think of offhand, but I'm sure there are a number of driveways that might service, my common driveways as a land surveyor. I come across common driveways all the time that cut through other parcels.
Thank you.
My one question is, even though the new house is not designed, and I apologize if I missed that, the plan that was provided as the theoretical house, is that the maximum footprint that would be allowable on that, or is there, how does that sort of relative to that?
I think it could actually be a little bit larger. If you look at the zoning table, take a look at the zoning table, what we indicated for lot 15.02, the maximum FAR that could be developed is 5,688 square feet.
5,600 what? 58?
5,688 square feet. And what we're proposing on that plan, if it were a full 2 stories, would be 5,396. It'd be very close to the maximum that would be permitted.
And just to clarify, I'm not really asking about the total footage of the house itself, but the footprint
Oh, the
itself.
footprint, building
Yes.
coverage? Building coverage that's allowed is 4,096. This house is at 2,698.
Okay, all right, thank you.
All right, other board members, I have a couple of questions of my own.
I'm sorry, Chair, just one more, if you don't mind, sir. Would the requirement of an approved landscape plan at the time of development be something the board would be able to stipulate?
Well, that's an item that when we normally go into Mr. Linson and there's tree removal involved, he normally asks for a tree replacement plan, so we would have no problem.
But by
That's a different
ordinance,
question. The question is. a
right,
landscape plan.
that's different. By ordinance, you have to replace a tree that's greater than 16 inches.
Correct.
Just by part of ordinance. But we're actually talking about the submittal of a landscape plan that would have to be approved.
We would have no problem with that.
Yeah, that's not atypical. I think Mr. Lanzafame is very familiar in some of our other towns where the condition of the approval is they have to file it with our landscape architect, and then we report back to the board, and if the board accepts it, then they can get signed off on. But it's a process. If I could ask one more question, because we were discussing what alternatives did you consider? For example, a turnaround or a K-turn towards the, I guess, westerly end of the driveway serving the existing dwelling. And then you would be able to remove the entirety of the paved surface on the proposed lot.
Say that one more time, John.
Either a circular driveway at the westerly end of the driveway serving the existing dwelling, or even a K-turn, which could go somewhere between two of the trees that are shown in that part of the site. And therefore, possibly not.
I didn't consider a K-turn in my analysis. We did consider cutting the driveway through and keeping it on proposed lot 1501. And the response from my client and our concern was the amount of impact to the landscaping along High Street. Is that what you mean?
Yes, but it appears from the way the plant material is shown on your exhibit that you could clearly provide for a K-turn. I'm not certain about a circular driveway yet.
Right, yeah. You might be able to with a minimal amount of impact onto the streetscape. Yes, right, we could do that, and we did not look into that in detail. In response to Mr. Deloro, I couldn't see, I have my computer glasses on, I can't see that far. There is a lot, actually, lot 12 is actually, you access that lot by a driveway across lot 11 that comes in from High Street. So just, it's not, we're not creating some extremely unusual condition by providing this driveway. Just wanted to, I forgot about that.
Well, I don't know that two are not unusual. There could still just be two in the city. It would still make it unusual. But certainly you have pointed another example
Don't
out.
disagree, but I wanted to give you all the information.
Understood, I appreciate that.
I guess I have just a couple of questions of my own here before we turn it over to members of the public. Mr. Lanzafame, you said that it was not subject to steep slopes. I've got about a 17, 18-foot drop from the corner of High Street and Prospect down to where the driveway is.
That's
It's
correct.
a fairly long distance, but when you go to the actual location of the footprint of the building, it's a pretty substantial grade right in that area.
Right. The proposed house would sit in an area that is pitched is about a 6-foot grade differential from the east side of the house to the west side of the house. We actually thought we could kind of tuck the house into there, and the garage would probably typically either 20 to 24 inches below the finished floor grade. So we thought it would work out quite nicely.
Okay, so it's not a steep slope at that portion.
No. The average slope on the site was 5.7%. Steep slopes are anything over 15%.
So the question I have has to do with the driveway location of the new proposed home. Relative to 123 Prospect Street, the lot immediately to the west of that, the lot 16, there's a driveway that comes out there, and then there's a driveway that you have proposed. Do you have any idea what the distances in the sight lines is?
Yeah, I measured it on Friday. I believe sight lines, did you
No,
say?
just the distance.
The distance between was about 35 to 40 feet.
And I guess within the city code, Matthew, I guess that's okay, with regard to the driveway locations. So sort of talking about safety, that popped up in my mind. I guess the other question that's been raised a couple of times here has to do with the landscape, sorry, the plan shown for the house. It's kind of a chicken and egg problem, you know, if you showed the house that was 1-story, people might say, well, you could build a 2-story. I guess the real question is, you know, is a 1-story home really in keeping with the character, looking at neighborhood character? It's not really what you have there. So it would be an outlier as far as that goes, but not necessarily that the board has any jurisdiction over that.
But the architecture could be well done with pitched roofs. As you know, your ordinance requires sloping roofs, 6 on 12. The architect, Dan is very talented. I'm sure he could create a single-story, one-story, single-family home.
Yeah.
Couldn't get that out.
Yeah.
With a nice sloping roof, with you know, certain treatments and dormers and things of that sort, that would fit quite nicely with the neighborhood.
I hear what you're saying, it's just not really quite the same as what you see in the neighborhood as it exists today. So I think the other question I had was for Mr. Dorr. With regard to the plans that you show, Chris, with the drainage across the site, can you walk us through that a little bit? Looking at site, drawing number 3, and just wasn't quite sure how the drainage was working, and you referred to it briefly, but maybe you could just walk us through that.
Yeah, there were, I believe, 4 dry wells that were supposed to be installed, and that was one of the comments that we made. Mr. Wonderful didn't provide that information of where they're located. What we had shown, correct me if I'm wrong, are lawn drains which pick up the stormwater and direct it to the dry well.
They're on the north side of the property.
And
Right-hand side.
So what we were just saying is that the dry wells are located on the north side of the property. So if you look where the storm drains run northerly between the pool and the house.
Yeah.
They come to a point, and between that point, then that goes to the west. That's where those dry wells are located.
Okay, all right. And that is construction that needs to be done when this home is constructed?
No, that was something that was noted in the original approval for the home.
Okay.
So, not for the home, but for some, for an addition on the side. So that was just pointed out because they were, as a condition, to show those dry wells.
So that exists today?
That exists today.
Okay, that's what I wasn't quite sure.
The new home will be subject to a grading permit.
Yeah.
Assuming it's completely compliant. If it's not,
Yeah.
the applicant is saying that it will be.
Yeah.
They will be at that point be required to provide all the stormwater controls for the ordinance and for the state.
Okay.
So they'll have at least one dry well, probably 2 or more. That will pick up the impervious coverage from the home and the driveway and the patio and walkways.
Okay, all right, great. We'd like to open it up to questions. If you have anything other that you'd like to say before we open up to questions from the public?
Well, the questions for public are just for him, correct? Because we're not done with, still have the applicant to
Yeah,
call.
for
Right.
questions for Mr. Alonso.
I just wanted to be clear, thank you.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So I know this is taking a long time. I see we have a number of members of the public here. I assume that you're here for this application. Could be the other one, too. We have 2 applications tonight. But if anyone in the audience has any questions of this witness, Mr. Alonso Fama, please come forward and state your name and address clearly, and we'll entertain the questions.
I have a
Sure. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I'm typically swear
State your name,
Right.
please, sir.
My name is John Christman. I live at
Hang on one
110
second.
Prospect Street.
I'm going to swear you in, sir.
Sure.
Raise your right hand. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give is the whole truth and nothing but the truth throughout the course of this hearing?
Yes, I do.
Okay, great.
Yes.
I'm not sure if this is the...
You can just
You-
state
you-
your name and
you
your
wanted to know if
address.
we had questions. I'm not sure I have questions, but I do have some comments and some objections from
Okay.
the neighbors. Is this
Okay.
the appropriate
So,
time to do
so
that?
what we usually do is we have questions of the witness for specific testimony that he's given, whether it's his planning testimony or his engineering testimony. And once those questions are given, then when we get to the point where the council has wrapped up their presentation, then we go to the public for general questions. which might fit better, general questions and comments at that point, unless you have any questions specifically of this witness.
The only question I have is the setback, the averages. How are those setbacks measured from the other houses?
Our survey crews measure those using a total station distance meter.
From
We can do
where
it
to where?
remotely. From, well, we physically locate the corners of the homes, and then we tie that into the street, and we determine what the setback is to the property line, to the right-of-way line.
Okay, because I may bring this later, but I have a disagreement with the numbers that I saw on your chart there.
Okay.
Well, that's something that you can discuss now. I mean, it's a technical question, so
Right.
let's bring it up at
Yeah,
this
so
point, yeah.
You have a
our house in particular, at 110 Prospect Street, you had the average setback, or you had the setback as 33 feet. Now, I'm not sure how that is measured, but from the curb of the street to the front of our house is about 63 feet. I got out there with a tape measure and measured it.
Okay.
Significantly more than 33 feet. And when I looked at your plan there and tried to just measure using the scale, it looks like to the front of that existing house, the proposed house, is about 55 feet. Or 57 feet, somewhere around there. It's hard to tell from the scale.
The proposed house is set back the
Yeah.
41.8 feet that we had calculated, plus there's about 10 or 12 feet from the right-of-way line to the curb line, so it's about 50 feet
Okay.
back.
So, you know, if you look at this, if you look at the houses on the street, just judging from that plan, and I know my house and my neighbor's house and the houses that are down from there, from the curb, they're set, you know, ours is probably the least, but we're still 63 feet from the curb. My neighbor's is about the same. Neighbor down there is about the same, and the ones across, I think, even further. So the 40, you've got it's not a huge difference, but I just kind of question I don't know where the calculations come
I'm just
from.
looking at the aerial image that we provided in Exhibit A1, and your house appears to line up very closely with 114 as well as 118. They all look like it's pretty much fairly in alignment. And we have 114 at 37.4 feet. So we have to include covered porches in our setback determination, so maybe that's the discrepancy that you're seeing.
Well, maybe, but I know for our house, that's still a stretch, and I would say it's a stretch for the neighbors next door, too. So I trust that these numbers are correct, but I can tell you if you just go stand out in the street and look at where the house sits, you know, from the curb, you know, it's a lot more than 33 feet. Granted, I understand that there's the easement for, on that side of the street, they have a sidewalk. Our side of the street, we don't. So I understand that there's, you know,
Are you measuring from the property line, Mr. Lonzafama?
Correct.
Not
Not the curb
so there's a few
From the
feet
right-of-way
between the curb to the property
It's
line.
about 10 to 12 feet.
Is that much?
Yeah.
Okay. So maybe that's what we're talking about here, is a measurement from the property line to the house versus the
And
street, the curb to the house.
Correct. And the subdivision that we're asking for, we can double check that number. That would adjust the average setback from the street. Wouldn't affect the lot we're proposing, the lot area, the lot size. Just so you're
No, I understand. I just, you know, it concerned me when I saw that my house was bringing down the average. And I know from the curb, it's 63 feet. And even if you allow for 15 feet of easement, that doesn't, it still doesn't, you know, 33 plus 15 does not get to 63.
I'll be happy to
So,
double check it and re-verify.
okay. That was the only question I had. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Any other members of the public have questions for Mr. Lonzafama? Please come forward.
Comments?
Yeah, questions, I meant to say. Comments will come later. We will have time for comments, for sure. Absolutely, we won't forget. Any other questions of this witness? All right. All right, you want to put another witness forward?
Yes, at this time, I'd like to call the principal of the applicant, Mr. Sal Garcia.
Okay. Swear in.
Hello? Do you swear the testimony you're about to give will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth throughout the course of this hearing?
Yes.
Can you state your name and your address, please?
Salvador Garcia, 2 High Street.
Okay.
Mr. Gar,
Yeah, please go ahead. Yeah.
sorry. Mr. Garcia, just by way of background, can you tell the board when you purchased the home and the house that you reside in now, just give a little bit of its history as you understand it?
So I'll start when we were looking for homes in the area. When we previously lived before, we had 3 homes altogether. My children had grown up with their mother next door and my grandfather next door, so we grew up with their great-grandparents and their parents. So it was very important when we were looking through Summit to find something with 2 homes. While he mentioned the house next door, it does have that easement going through to get to the rear yard, and I believe there's another one that we saw that another realtor had showed us throughout town. It was important. They knew what we were looking for. We needed something with 2 homes. When this home came up, the first came up and said, well, here's a lot that's large enough that we could knock the house down, to subdivide it, build 2 homes, and there's nothing anybody, we could knock down all the trees, we could do everything. And I said, no, it's not what we want to do. So when we did find the home, we loved the fact that it had all the privacy, we liked all the landscaping on the outside, and I think it was very important, it's because it could still fit our needs of what we were trying to accomplish of keeping our family together and keeping everybody close. And as you can know, in Summit, it's near impossible to find a home, let alone 2 homes next to each other. And we did actually make an offer on the house 2 houses down, which had 2 homes that had that easement. And unfortunately, they told us to take a hike. And they said our price wasn't good enough, and they ended up taking less. And then we ended up finding this home. And it was brought to us, and they said, well, you know, you could knock the house down, you could subdivide and do all that. But if there's a lot of history behind this home, you may not know. It used to be the Benjamin Moore home, which owned all of these properties. So we want to maintain that. We're not in doing that to knock a home down just to get what we're trying to accomplish. The landscaping was another very important part to why we loved the home. We said you walk it. My daughter just said, she goes, I see him all the time, so I guess you do walk by it when she looks through. One of the important things is to keep that privacy. My business is very public in some senses. So I do want the privacy, and you know, say, why is the company? A company, it just maintains my privacy. People can Google you, find out where you live. I don't want that. That was one thing that was very important. So we were able to keep the privacy, and at the same time, we were able to do it. My daughters can also now walk to school, and my son will be going to school in Morristown, so it won't be far. When we had this, we looked at it, and we did say it was an oversized lot. I do know there's maybe 2 or 3 outliers, and this is an outlier. And from all of Summit, we can see it's actually an outlier. It's not that many acreage, so it's very rare. We had asked to originally build another home on it, and we do have the land to build like an adjacent structure of some sort, that you could do it like a pool house or something like that. Fortunately, you couldn't do a kitchen. You couldn't really have separation of my wife and my mother-in-law, and, you know, my mom, and just having separate type things. And we even said that one day in the future, we would probably move to the little house there, and hopefully our kids would move to the other one. One of the other questions you brought about the driveway is, I think Michael explained it, and they've been telling me from this, is that driveway kills you, but it does kill me from a personal real estate perspective. Yes, I get the easement. I probably hurt myself. You hurt that corner lot. But I'm maintaining the characteristic of the home. If I cut that out, I get it. We make this project clean, sweep. I make that turn into High Street. I have to knock all those trees down. You now can see the house right from the front. You eliminate all that privacy, and you kill all that corner in High Street. We don't want to do that. We could, and they've been telling me from then, just turn the driveway, curve it out, and go. But why would you want to do something because that's the easier path? So we did want to come here in front of the board and said the easement is important. There's a number of reasons that it is important as well. Number one, you cannot see the house. So it's very important. We've had police come through. We've already had some situations where people are coming through. You can come right up. God forbid there's ever an incident with an ambulance, they can come right up to the house. Nobody can see the house. We already have problems with deliveries, which is fine. That's what we want. We want the privacy of the home. But when people come through, they can come in, come out, come in, come out. It's very important. On the High Street side, we want to keep it. Me and Mike have a little debate on the house of how many trees we can keep and not keep. I think I can keep all but 2 or 3. He says 6 have to go. You asked the question about the basement. That's going to be determined if that's going to kill a tree or not kill a tree. What we're trying to accomplish is to put the home in the grass area without affecting the area. We would possibly be able to build a home and you wouldn't even see it. The trees from the front would not. The idea is to keep it compliant 100% and maintain the character of what used to be the Benjamin Moore home and keep it on that corner. We didn't want to come in, knock it down, build two homes. It's very important to keep that historical feel, keep that corner the way it is. We don't want to, you know, affect the whole area. We did design the home because Daniel told us everybody has a two-story home. We don't want it, so we designed the home. If you have your architectural plans, it is a designed two-story home. We do have the ability to say, hey, from the outside it looks two-story, but we don't need it. You know, it would be overkill, but we would make it designed that way. So from the exterior, it looks like a two-story home, but then it would just be extra space for nothing that she would use. So you do have the architectural plans. That is the architectural plan that we've taken so much time to put together. If you go through it, you can see there's a master bedroom on the first floor, and there is another bedroom on the second floor. We added the 2 bedrooms because they said, keep with the area, put the second floor, and we said, fine, put it, but from the interior perspective, when you walk in, it would just be, you know, attic space. And there are a number of homes that we've even saw in Summit that we went to see that had attic space up top that was not in use, but from the exterior, they did have dormers that just looked into the attic. I think that's very common.
So Sal, just to be clear on that point, you're willing to stipulate to the board that the elevations they're seeing, the footprint of this house that's submitted in your package would be the elevation and design that you would build. So it would appear to be a 2-story.
Yes, there are certain things. I think Daniel, our architect, has 3 dormers. We kind of want to tie it together as one. We want to make sure we sit down and really design this because this is our forever home in a sense, and we want to make sure that it still fits with the home, fits with the area. The other thing we've talked about, Michael, is that we haven't gone out and actually marked out the grass where we can see the plan, and if you pull it up, if you see the driveway, you can see what the thing is. And this is where he said, well, we shouldn't talk about this, we'll figure this out. I'm like, I want to talk about it because I want them to know what I'm trying to accomplish. If you see, we didn't put the driveway out, the walkway out to the front. We put it out to the driveway because we want to maintain that tree frontage along Prospect. If you see where the driveway is, I said, well, can I make that driveway smaller enough that you can get in and I can save the 2 trees that are there? And we're looking at that. I said, well, the roots, there are some that are dying along that side. I would try to fit the house perfectly to not take down any trees. I don't want any of them, especially, you know, along that street, because if you see the other, Michael, if you pull up the picture, when you drive down the home, you can't see it. It's completely private. We want the new home. You wouldn't be able to see that one either. And it maintains the character of the area. We're not doing this from like a development perspective. So yes, from a development perspective and a real estate perspective, keeping an easement through a property probably lowers my value, but that's not what I'm doing here. Like, it doesn't make any sense to do that. I get that. But from a personal perspective and the fact that my family is there and everybody is there, yes, I don't care about the nominal value. This is more for the personal value. And it's not more convenience. It's more keeping with the characteristic of Summit, keeping the characteristics of home. If I cut a regular circular driveway into High Street, what have I done to the home? I've completely killed the characteristic of that particular home by making your average, everyday circular driveway like everyone else has. And what have I done? I've now opened this beautiful home up and gotten rid of the landscaping and done your standard new cookie cutter circular driveway. Why would I want to do that? And this is the same conversation I had with Michael and I had with Rosemary. They're like, get rid of the dude. I'm like, no, this is a characteristic of the home. Why do I want to go back to the regular cookie cutter circular driveways? This is something that's, you know, it's beautiful. And if we don't make a decision or we say we want to put it up, I invite everybody to come walk the property and you'll see what we're trying to accomplish. Like seriously, come see and then you'll understand, wait, because you can't see it unless you come inside. You know what I mean? You walk it all the time, John. You know, she said it, you walk. I say if you guys want to put it off, come. I'll walk the property. I'll show you what we're trying to accomplish, how we're going to be able to do it. And like I said, if I got rid of that and I changed certain things, yes, I would become compliant, but then I would be killing the landscaping, killing the character. So it's like kind of, what do? Go the easy route and just get it approved and you don't have to clean your hands and do everything the way it is, or say, hey, show your case, show why you want to do it. And then I think everybody can realize, oh, wait a minute, this does make more sense. Let's see why. And if you notice also, the walkway into the home is not straight in, not the new one, the existing one. I don't know if you could scroll down a little bit. But the existing one also has curvature. And the reason that you do curvature like that is to provide more privacy. If you do a straight run, if you see the walkway, go to the right, the walkway, go up a little bit. Sorry, down. Yeah, right there. See how the walkway, you can see the walkway where that light post we were talking about before, it comes in here. I'll show you guys right here. see it. It's the same thing with this driveway, and that has maintained home, so it is a special home in Summit. And we love the fact that it's a special home. And we want to maintain that. So if we go and just change this driveway to say, hey, it's easier, and nothing against her right now, she's like, get rid of the driveway, and everybody's like, no. If didn't you just cookie cutter circular driveway? You know, I know that's a big stickler point, and she brought it up. It becomes cookie cutter. And that's not what we want. And not what this, and the design of this home will be designed to fit there so you don't see it from the street. You know, literally, like we were saying, construction, I don't even want to bother anybody on the block. Like, we're going to go in the existing driveway and Prospect, and everybody would work in there quietly in that little thing and come right out. The trees wouldn't love, and we're going to do everything. Like, I don't know if this is engineering on their end, but if we can adjust the driveway, which we talked about, to keep those trees, I'm all right with it. Even if the driveway on the new home becomes a little turned to keep the tree, we're going to turn it. But apparently we couldn't go through all that now because they said it's something we do later on.
Well, Mr. Garcia, thank you very much. That was very, very helpful, very interesting. Any members of the board have any questions for Mr. Garcia?
I do want to clarify that I never said to make it a circular driveway.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's why you said the case. I was just,
No,
I
I did
apologize for that, yeah. There was somebody who said the circular driveway.
No.
That's a question I think that is a reasonable question to ask. Anyone else have any questions for Mr. Garcia? Jane?
Yeah. Mr. Garcia, you mentioned that the design is essentially attic with dormers. Are you providing or assuring that the actual house itself could have bedrooms added with that addition later by a future owner? Could
Yes.
convert the second
Yeah,
floor
the
to
floor
attic?
plans are designed with that, and we've talked to the designers. Basically, we don't put it in the stairs, and it becomes regular attic space, and it's designed, if you pull it up, do you have the architectural ones there? Yeah, this is good enough. Everybody has a set, which we did include, and that's why it took so much time. So if you look at, yeah, so if you look at one of one, you can notice where the entrance of the home is, and you'll see everything is one-story living. And then if you look, the staircase is there, kind of goes up and up to the second floor, and if you look on the right side, you can see the second floor. That staircase would basically just go up to attic space, or we could not put the staircase in. If somebody wanted to bring those other 2 bedrooms upstairs, which would make it a 4-bedroom home, you simply bring the stairs in, and you put them in.
And you would stipulate that that you would build a house that would be a 4-bedroom house in theory or potentially?
It could potentially be a 4-bedroom house, yes. It would be designed ready for that if somebody ever wanted to open up those bedrooms upstairs, yes.
So ready for expansion.
Yeah, it's already designed, it's ready, she doesn't need it, and I don't expect that. And by the way, everything is designed to be 1-story living, so we would, and I also think of it for us for the future, like I said before, like, one day maybe, we'll move into the house, and the kids will want to move into the big house, and we can still keep everybody in the same thing. And that is the goal, so it was kind of a design for us, and then we also wanted to make sure that there was at least a separation of home, so there's, a division of families, but still together.
Do our professionals have any questions of Mr. Garcia?
Just the one that I had asked of Mike. Did you give consideration to, say, a K-turn, which would accomplish, I think, some of what you were trying to achieve?
For the existing lot?
Yes.
In the front of the home? The issue is it wouldn't allow for any ambulances or anybody to pull right up into the front of the home and making the space, because in order for the ambulance or a large vehicle to make it, doesn't have enough space there. So there is parking that is horizontal parking. It is not a parallel park. So the spots in front of the home are more of side by side.
Yeah, but isn't that fairly typical of every house?
This is not a typical home.
You could say that.
We don't want to make it a typical home, and we want to maintain it, the unique home it is.
Does any members of the public have questions for this witness, for Mr. Garcia? Members of the public have a question specifically for this witness? Before we get to comment. All right, so could we take a little bit of a break here? Our stenographer's been working for almost 2 hours. Usually we like to wrap up a case application before that, but I think we probably pushed a little bit too far here. Yes.
Before we go, one more thing I want to say. I think, and I'm sorry, I really apologize. I got whoever said circular driveway and the whole nine, and somebody had said something about landscaping, and I don't want to point that out, but whoever it was, they said that they wanted to, if I would be open to like a landscaping plan or to show it. We've gone through what we have, but if something wanted something additional and extra, I'm open to it. Like, we're going to hire a landscape designer to make sure that because some of the trees, like Mike pointed out, are already dying, the ones along Prospect.
Yeah.
So we were working to make sure that there, so if it was an additional stipulation that to do additional landscaping, we are 100%
We'd like to
open.
stipulate that a landscape plan be submitted when the building plans are submitted. And I
100%.
think that's
We
really
would-
the
so-
key. Okay, then if we can just take a break here, if that's all right with you. And then
Yes.
when we come back, we'll have comments from the public. So let's take a break until 9:30. That gives us about 7 or 8 minutes. Is that okay? All right, okay, great, thanks. Let's reconvene the meeting here. Thanks, everyone, for giving us some time for a break. Where are we now relative? Have you pretty much presented your witnesses and then want to do a summation before we open it up to public, or how would you like to proceed?
Is what I'd like to do, Mr. Chairman, at this point in time is reserve my summation for after the public provides their questions and comments, and also ask that I reserve it until after maybe some board discussion.
Is that all right to do that, I guess? Yeah. Okay.
It's at your discretion.
All right, sure, we can do that. After board discussion, we usually close the hearing at that point and go to a vote. So you're suggesting that after board discussion, you can have a summation, and then we'll close the hearing and go to a vote? Is that what I understand you're proposing?
That is, Mr. Chairman.
The rest of the board members okay with that idea? It's a little out of the ordinary for us. We usually require to have your summation done, before we go into
I think it's
public
important
comment.
that the applicant hear some of the board's discussion and points and the members of the public, and trying to make further decisions and where the summary might be as far as how I might summarize.
Okay, that's fine. We can go and do that. Let's go ahead and have members of the public come forward if they'd like and present any comments that they might have with regard to this application. I know you've been waiting quite a while, so please come forward. And going to go first. All right, here we go. Now, you've already been sworn in and told us your name, so you can go ahead and speak.
Great, thank you. So this caught a lot of the neighbors by surprise, because we just got this letter, and all it said was that they wanted to divide the lot up in half to a long, narrow strip on Prospect. And so several of the neighbors had some objections, some complaints, and put together a letter that's been signed by several of the neighbors, which I'd like to read if I could.
Should we do that? I'm not sure we can do that, actually.
Yeah.
Okay.
It would count really as giving testimony, and you have to be present to do that.
Okay, well, okay, that's fine. That was part of the problem, though. We've got a lot of neighbors that are out of town.
Yeah,
So
understood.
they were not able to be here.
Yeah. Can you sort of summarize in your mind what the issues are?
Yeah, so the variance is for the lot size. And what is going to happen now is that the lot on Prospect Street, facing that lot, is a very wide lot and very narrow, very shallow, which is different than a lot of the lots on Prospect Street. Most of the lots they're similar width. They have big backyards, which obviously you can't see from the street. Setbacks are roughly the same. As I mentioned before, our house is probably one of the shallower ones, but it's still good 60 feet from the curb. And the concern was that this is not really in keeping with the character of Prospect Street because of the fact that the lot is so wide and so shallow, and that there's this driveway now that cuts, which is still there, but it cuts through to the neighboring house. Now, I've learned a lot from what I've heard here. We didn't know any of this stuff, and we didn't know whether the little house was going to get sold right away. And as you mentioned, he could go build this house, but we don't know what's going to happen in the future if that falls through. I've lived on Prospect Street for about 30 years, and I can tell you the street's changed quite a bit, but the change has been very consistent in that the smaller single-story houses have all been torn down, and there are multi-story houses that have gone up, and they're all very consistent in how they look. Little different architectural styles, but very consistent. I know that was brought up before. There are no one-story homes on Prospect Street, and our concern was that one. So now you've got this very wide lot, and the house is now it's to the left of it, we are concerned about the trees. You know, I know a lot of those trees are not in good shape, and, you know, I'm assuming just from what I've seen in the past, when people try to do this work, a lot of trees come down in front of the house. As a matter of fact, one of the houses down the street from us, all the trees came out, and the whole front is open now. So that was a major concern, and we just thought from, as you go down Prospect Street and look at it, it's just gonna look odd that you've got this house that's you know, still fairly close to the street, and it's just this very shallow lot. I appreciate what I heard tonight. This was stuff that I didn't know and didn't comprehend. So, you know, I have a much better understanding of what Sal's trying to do, which I didn't before. But just one thing I'd like to add, if it makes a difference, is that I do work for the first aid squad. I've been with the first aid squad for a long time. I can tell you the ambulance gets up very few driveways in this town. So if, you know, if getting an ambulance to the front door is a concern, not going to happen. You know, we park on the street, so that's not, you know, I don't want that to be a significant safety issue for that. But I think that's all I have, and again, a lot of these concerns have been cleared up, which I can relate to the neighbors. However, I do have this. It does not appear to be consistent with the way the neighborhood's set up with the lots, just because it's so wide and so shallow. And I think that's it.
All right, well, thank you. Appreciate your comments. Thanks for being here. I'm sorry we've kept you here so late.
Oh.
My name is Marilyn Falls. I live at 118 Prospect Street.
You're right. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth throughout the course of this hearing?
I do.
Okay, great.
Marilyn, Y-I-L-Y-N. Last name P as in Peter, F for Frank, A-L, T for Thomas, Z. We moved to 118 Prospect Street in 1965, and the Moore Estate was the Moore Estate. It was about 5 acres, I think. And we were very involved, actually, when it was broken up. My husband was in the office as an attorney when it was broken up. So I know the history of the property, interestingly enough, which I guess most people aren't aware of, that it, in fact, burned almost to the ground. The Rices lived there, and so the Moore Estate, the Moore House actually is not in existence. They rebuilt the house and lived there for quite a time, and then sold it to another couple, and then the Roberts, I believe, are the couple that came and put in the circular driveway, which would, we think, about 15 years maybe. Because in the beginning, you drove your car down the side of the house like most of us do and put it in the garage and then backed out and came up frontwards. It was able to be done. And I haven't seen what's happened in that area, but I assume it's pretty much the same. So that's the history. I do think that having lived on the street as long as I have and had seen various new homes have gone up during this period, I don't get a sense that this is in the keeping of the character of the street because of the long extended lot in the front. And what was a bit concerning, and I do appreciate the reason for him wanting to do this, and the idea that he will make every effort to make that building sort of conform to the character. But I did hear the idea that it will be a small house tucked away, sort of so that we don't know it's there, and that's kind of not what the houses of the surrounding area are. I mean, they're kind of houses that make a statement, somebody owns them. It's a fabulous property, that property, and in many ways it's a shame to break it up for any reason. But I think that my final comment is I don't think it really carries what the rest of the street looks like. But that's to be determined. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Foss. Any other members of the public like to provide a comment with regard to this application? comments? Okay, hearing none. I guess at this point, we'll close. Did you want to make a statement at this point?
No,
No.
I'd rather wait, if I may,
Oh,
Mr.
sure,
Chairman.
yeah. All right, so we'll close the public hearing portion of the application and go to the board and see if there's any other comments and deliberations among the board members. Who would like to go first with their thoughts on the application? Anyone just want to step up and volunteer first? Well, I'll start. Oh, go ahead, Matthew, you go ahead.
No,
Go. I'm usually jumping on, so.
Okay, no, I mean, I definitely feel that the reason behind this gentleman wanting to do what he wants to do is very admirable. Family is our most precious commodity, so I do appreciate the interest. I can't imagine, though, having a driveway cut a property in half for the future of the city. I mean, obviously, while we are about helping people make their dreams come true, we still have laws, and I think for the longevity of the property itself, it'd be very hard to allow a subdivision to go on where the property is just literally cut in half, where a child has to cross what could be a place in which vehicles are traveling to get to the other side of their property. That's very hard for me to imagine. So that's something that concerns me about what's being proposed, is just putting it before my fellow members. Sure.
Okay. Jay, would you want to go next?
I have this feeling that we're all trying to, the applicant and ourselves here are all trying to accomplish the same thing, to make this as conforming with the neighborhood and maintain the beautiful landscaping, which we all appreciate. And that's desirable. I share some of Matt's point of view with regard to the driveway. I think that with the appropriate stipulations, and please understand the purpose of the stipulations is just so that we are being asked to approve something now that still, the improvements are somewhat uncertain. Well, they are uncertain. You've told us that. We would like to work with you, as Matt said, to allow you to accomplish a very admirable goal, maintain a very attractive property for your family, highly desirable. I think the question I have is, how do we accomplish that? How do we get comfortable that we're acting in the best interests of the city and the residents as well as yourselves? And to me, that requires some combination of a stipulation, a landscape plan, because we, as I think a few people have already acknowledged, during construction, trees are damaged and lost. That's what a landscape plan is. I understand what's there now. That's easy. What's going to be there when the project's finished? So, in my mind, I can see my way forward with this with a few conditions along addressing those issues. That is, the landscaping which we all desperately want to maintain, which I think, in my mind, goes a long way to dealing with the character question. If the landscaping is maintained the way it's being proposed in words, and if it really is done that way, then some of the objections, I think, can be minimized. The size of the property, the size of the house, the placement of the house can be minimized if, in fact, that landscaping really is maintained after construction, not just what's shown on the plan today.
Well, to pick up where you left off there, Jay, I think the stipulations are important. We've heard 3 stipulations, maybe 2 that are related, but one specifically to try to stipulate to keep the trees that are in the landscape area that Mr. Lonzafama showed in his photographs. And along with that, we'd like to see a landscape plan that accompanies the home when it's brought in for approval to a building department. And then the fact that the home would look like a 2-story home from the street. It doesn't matter to me personally whether there was anything above that area, and if it's designed to be expandable to a second floor, a functional second floor, that works for me. And I think with regard to the drive bisecting the property, when I first looked at this thing, I wasn't much of a fan of that, but after listening to Mr. Garcia and to others here tonight, I think, in fact, Mr. Garcia is aware of the fact that this easement is probably going to cost him a few dollars. In fact, when he goes to sell this second lot or the whole thing sometime in the future, that in fact someone will probably discount the price of that lot, given that it has an easement across it. So I think he's aware of that, and I think that's not a factor from his perspective. He wants to keep that. And I think it does circular drive, and if you were to do that, I'm not a big fan of circular drives in general anyway, but if the circular drive on High Street, you end up with two drives, whether they be 125 feet apart or not, but they're two drives on a hill that's sloped there as well. So I think that should we have those stipulations in place, I would be in favor of moving forward with the application.
Mr. Chair?
Yep, John.
I have a bigger problem with this application, and I'd like us to talk about it a little bit. And it has to do with compromising on neighborhood lot area. I think that the MLUL provides that we consider the average lot area as a way to protect the character of neighborhoods. And this is asking for, by my math, about a 25% discount, a 25% variance, 22,000 some odd square feet instead of the required 29,000 square feet. And I feel that that lowers the neighborhood average, and every time we grant this, someone's going to come in for a 25% discount off a new lower average. We are going to dumb down the size of the lots, till they start to approach the minimum size lot, in a sense. And I feel that that's something we should give some serious thought to. I walked the neighborhood, as you all noticed, and the neighborhood's filled with grand homes and some substantial lots. And I think that a case needs to be made for why this variance is actually, beneficial to the neighborhood. I've heard the detriments. I haven't heard anything outweighing the detriments. And our test, I think our board's responsibility is to ask what the public benefit is for this, not what the landowner's benefit is. Now, the landowner's very sympathetic. I get it. But at the end of the day, I don't see how this benefits anyone except for the landowner, and I feel uncomfortable saying that that's I'm open to being more persuaded, but I don't feel that this application really advances. There's no I look at the physical features test, and I don't see anything unique about the property that calls for the variances. And I look at the public benefits test, and I mean, we've heard testimony that it promotes development and appropriate densities. Well, we're going to be talking about density in this town and adding density in this town in a different neighborhood. And I don't think we're looking to add density in Prospect Street. That's a different conversation for a different part of town. So I understand how the state master plan, calls for density and transit zones and such, but we are addressing that differently. I don't think we're required to look at it as a positive, in this neighborhood. So I guess, that I don't feel that this really, this application passes the test for me.
Okay. I guess one of the counter to that would be it's an R15 zone, which requires 15,000 square feet, so it could be even smaller technically, I guess, than it is. And at 18,000 feet, 15,000 times 20% gets you to 18,000 foot size lot. So that is what the current zoning is in place. And so I'm just kind of caught between a rock and a hard place in some ways as it relates to the size of the lots. Like yourself, I like the size of the larger lots. But when I look at the underlying zoning, I wonder if, we can make that decision effectively at the board, given the zoning that's in place. And maybe that's something our consultants can give us a little more thought on that way. But let's listen to the rest of the board members in terms of their thoughts and ideas on the site, and on the plan. Ellen, any thoughts?
Just sort of reiterating what I stated earlier about the driveway. I'm not sure I understand the need for the design the way it stands with, you're talking about, you mentioned privacy, and you have two entrances to the property. So it's sort of, to me, if I wanted privacy, I would have one entrance and one exit rather than two. And now also on Prospect Street, you have an additional house and a driveway. And so that sort of, I feel, again, is not keeping in character with Prospect Street. I'm very familiar with that block. I've driven it quite frequently. So I think that kind of chops up that. So again, I think it's slightly detrimental to the overall look of the neighborhood. And again, I think that's one of my main concerns. I just not understanding how that's going to benefit a future homeowner having it that way. And what else did I want to say? I'm sorry. And then also regarding the plans for the new house. Again, they're not set in stone. We're not really sure what's going to be built there. And with the landscaping, just sort of agreeing with Jay and Matt and what they said as well. So I'd be inclined to not grant the variances based on those reasons.
I guess one of the questions are, from a legal perspective, whether we're, the design of the home is not necessarily required to be submitted with regard to a lot subdivision, if I understand that correctly. I may be wrong about that. I'm assuming the board can ask for more or less what they'd like, but I could use some clarification either from Joe or from you, Matt, with regard to our reaction to the fact that there are plans or not have plans with regard to a subdivision.
Right. I mean, the important thing to consider is that the applicant, it's not a checklist item that is part of the subdivision application. So the question is, does the presentation that they give in terms of the potential single-family home that would be put on the lot, does that further their proofs for the variances that they're requesting? They have come here today arguing that those additional submittals help them prove their case for establishing the variances, but that there is no requirement that they have sent that in ahead of time. It's not a checklist item for a minor subdivision.
And if I may, counsel, just to be clear.
Let us finish the board deliberation first, and then maybe can respond. I think that would be better.
I just wanted to, because I think
And
it would help the board.
the benefit of the chairman allowing you to speak after the board commented was for the reason that we would be able to converse. I mean, the luxury of being able to do that, that's not something that is afforded.
I do understand that. I just wanted to make sure, in case it was overlooked, that the applicant had stipulated that he would build that particular house so that there was certainty for the board as far as the elevation and footprint. That's all. I wasn't going to go into any other commentary.
Okay, all right. So other comments, thoughts from the board?
Yes, Chair. Thanks, Bill. Yeah, much like what Ellen was talking about, there's a lot of unknowns here. And, but the other thing that concerns me, this driveway, it's just very odd. I don't know how this is a benefit in the future, 10, 15 years out. That concerns me, how this benefits the neighborhood, that property itself. I appreciate what the Garcia family is trying to do. It sounds like it could be amazing. I think that driveway, really, the access point from Prospect Street is just not necessary. I think that would alleviate a lot of concerns for people. You have access from High Street to your home. Then there's the driveway that will be service the new proposed house. That extra driveway on Prospect, I don't know why we're so dug in on that. And that's a concern just for the property itself going forward. This 10, 15, 20 years from now, people are going to say, why did they let that happen? I think, Well,
I would advise the board just in terms of what decision it's making from a legal perspective as to this driveway. The applicant would be allowed to, as part of their private property contract rights, to establish an easement over their next-door neighbor's lawn, provided that they compensate them for it and it's recorded, et cetera. The driveway really is key to the board's analysis because there are particular variances that are related to the driveway. So what the board needs to consider is the fact that the driveway deviates from the driveway setback requirement. That's one of the variances that's requested. The way that the driveway circulates is a variance, and there's also the existing nonconformity for that parking area. That's really what the board has to consider when it's analyzing the driveway. I would be hesitant for the board solely to consider, well, what will this look like in the future if a future owner has an easement over the property? What's really critical is that the board think about the variances that are necessitated by the driveway, less so than this concern that the other lot will have an easement over it.
Okay.
But if I could just add, isn't that, he could grant an easement on the neighboring property that he owns both if we grant the subdivision?
Right.
So we'd have to grant the subdivision, and then he could.
Correct, but
And then he could grant the easement to himself.
But the relief that they're requesting with respect to the driveway are the variances that I mentioned, right?
Understood.
Yeah.
That's all I have.
Paul, I haven't heard from you tonight.
Well, we've addressed a lot of what my questions were, but my main concerns, and most of it has been answered, but if there's a care to re-verify anything I'm about to say, is really, in addition to the landscaping concerns, because as I think Jay or someone else said, you know, when you do a construction project, whether it's intentional or not, something's going to go awry with the existing vegetation, and you're likely to need to replace what's there in some capacity. So having contingency plans in place for that, I think, is important. It's not so much a question as a matter of opinion, I guess, on my point here, but I don't know how you ensure that overall. If we can get that stipulation, that would be very helpful. But more than anything, we spoke to this a little bit earlier, the lot coverage, as long as this is conforming to within the zoning, I think that's the most important key here. If this was somehow a variance in terms of the house relative to the lot size, and if it was not conforming to the distance from the new property lines that it should be, I'd have some real concerns here. But if it is conforming with that, I think it's not a bad project.
Just one thought with regard to the driveway is if the drive were to terminate at the front door of the big house and not go over the new lot, one would still have access, in a more typical home, have access by a single driveway on High Street coming in with the garage to that level.
The existing
or to the front door.
driveway, okay.
With the front door, obviously, if you went to the front door, you'd have to back up, and that's a little inconvenient. But it is possible to do something like that. You wouldn't have to make it a circular drive. It wouldn't have to take away any of those trees at all. You would still have the same amount of privacy. In fact, it's possible that you could obtain more privacy if you were to not put that driveway in and landscape more heavily where that driveway currently exits onto Prospect.
The new driveway.
Yeah,
I agree.
yeah.
I think that's an excellent point.
That's a possibility. I'm just sort of throwing out, possibilities.
And Bill, to your point on that, maybe that would be my one other driveway-related comment of any kind, but I have no issues with the existing driveway that some people have expressed in terms of the why is it there. I think that's the landowner's prerogative, and if the easement is something that he wants to have, he can have that. He can always take it away and remove that driveway 5 years, 50 years from now, whatever it might be.
I think we've, anyone else have any thoughts, ideas before we wrap up our debate? Comments, thoughts? All right. And I'd like to have a moment to wrap up your testimony.
So
Hold on. No, you're done testifying, okay? Sorry, if I may just.
Yeah, sure.
Yep. Okay. Mr. Chairman, board members, in listening to all of your very, very detailed discussions, I would like to request that we could amend the application to remove the driveway easement altogether. So instead of the driveway easement going across 1501, or technically Lot 15 per your tax assessor, over to 1501, we would eliminate it, and the applicant will either do a circular driveway or elect to possibly just end the driveway and maybe put some additional coverage in for, allow for a better K-turn. That would be the applicant's discretion, because either way, there's no variances required for that decision for that property. I would also like to let the board know that as the owner of 118 Prospect said, she's correct. The original Benjamin Moore house did burn in a fire. But is what she didn't tell the board is that the owners at that time took painstaking detail to try to rebuild the original Benjamin Moore house in extensive detail. In fact, if you go into your archives here in the city, there's lots of articles written about what those homeowners did. So when my client looked at this property, first he looked at it like a typical developer, and he said, hey, what's really important to me, and you heard him say it in his testimony, was I want to have the ability to have 2 homes for my family. He grew up, as he testified, in a situation where he was maybe somewhat privileged or spoiled to have 3 lots contiguous that most of us don't have. And I'm jealous that he has such a relationship with his family that he wants his parents right next door. I can assure you I wouldn't. But with that being said, rather than him coming here with a matter of right application, which he could do, the lot is 3.6 times the size. It eliminates every variance, every concern that you heard Board Member Zucker indicate about averaging and statistics and all of those things. He could do that. And then this board would miss such an important opportunity that it has today, because my client has stipulated that he will do a detailed landscaping plan. He will work with your board planner. He's willing, as he stipulated, to do some type of restrictive agreement that it will keep those mature tree line that the neighborhood and the city has grown accustomed to see, because not only is it important to the city and the board members here, but it's equally important to my client. That's how much detail and attention he put into this. This wasn't an application thrown together in a couple of months and thrown at this board. As your board secretary will indicate, we submitted over it's been almost 2 years already, working with your board professionals, working with changes to the plan to come to this. And obviously my client's mother, who is still here, had thought she'd already have a house to live in. So we really were hoping to be able to present tonight, and maybe not as well as we should have, Mr. Zucker, to your point of not understanding why we felt that in my client's testimony that preserving the existing home and not just doing a straight subdivision, even though we require that technical variance, and it is a technical variance because, as board chairman indicated, we meet the straight variance relief and standards for the zone. This lot that we're creating is more than 18,000 square feet for the corner. We did that intentionally to preserve the Benjamin Moore house and to preserve that beautiful estate and still have a house that's going to be built that would be complementary. In fact, if you take good care and look at the architectural submitted, my client took design features similar to Benjamin Moore's style as well to give that house that he's building a little more character, to make it seem like it's supposed to be with that property, because this is something that he envisioned for his and his family to be together. Summit doesn't allow a carriage house. We're not allowed to have those types of things, so therefore we came in with this type of subdivision relief. We do think that our engineer and planner, being one person, has conveyed to the board the proofs necessary under the C2 standard. We weren't requesting C1, physical features, hardships. We were here under that C2 standard for the benefits are outweighing the detriments. And by eliminating the easement driveway, we have now eliminated 3 of the 5 variances, which leave us with just the 2 variances, which are both technical variances that have to do with averaging. And with that being said, we hope this board will vote yes on our application. Thank you.
You're almost done.
One last point.
I apologize, but my client would like to further amend that if the board would so see fit, if there are some board members who would see to grant the variance relief with a license that would be terminated if the lots were ever owned by different ownership.
License pertaining to
To the driveway.
To the driveway. That's something that I guess falls with title. It has to be a recorded document of some kind or another.
Well, no, not for a, no, not unless it's a formal easement gets documented. Just a license would be sort of it's a revocable arrangement that's made between the two owners. Now, we could, of course, request that they supply us with a legal document to the satisfaction of the board attorney and board engineer as a condition, such that the license would become terminable at the point where, or that the applicant agrees that the license would become terminable upon one of the 2 lots being conveyed in any kind of private sale.
I guess I wonder how the city, how you administer that and keep track of that. I don't know, Matthew, do you have any idea how that's done?
The office is good at maintaining meticulous records.
And it would be part of the resolution, which would be,
File would be a reference that we use a lot of times, so we go back.
And-
I don't know if Chris, you
Well,
add to that.
I guess what I would say is it would be documented within the resolution. This type of condition probably requires significant thought, and it might not be all achieved in this meeting, right? But you could always have before the resolution be memorialized, you could also have that language to make sure you guys are comfortable with it.
So I guess the question to the board is that, you know, if that was something that we'd be willing to live with, it seemed like it was a binary position, the way we're looking at it, either with or without that easement. This is something in between, and it's a question if some board members feel strongly that they don't want that easement there, that's one way of looking at it. The other is, you know, whether you could live with a stipulation that would allow that upon sale to be terminated. And I'm not sure what the benefit of that is. It does benefit the seller, of course, but I don't know if you had complaints about the easement relative to what it does to the neighborhood, that's a different, the easement would be there, the drive would be there, and it would be there for foreseeable future.
How about this idea? In exchange for that, there's not a circular drive built, so that there's not a second driveway on High Street. I'm of the opinion that the existing driveway serves the High Street house, to High Street, perfectly fine. And therefore, I think what had been proposed was they removed the request for the easement approval.
Yes.
But that did not prevent them, because I think as of right now, if I understand it, they can put a circular drive in. In other words, another access point on High Street.
Right, right.
Well, how about we find a better solution, which is they're allowed to keep the driveway as is, subject to this termination clause that just exists. But there's not an approval for a circular drive, because in my opinion, that works
You can't have both.
You can't have both. Well, yes, you can only one or the
So we
other.
would be
you agree to
imposing a
that as a
restriction.
deed restriction?
We could, and then I think it might be easier, counsel, for the board if, as part of the deed restriction, we just make it a requirement that the resolution that board counsel would draft would be recorded, so it becomes a title issue as well, so there would never be an argument as to notice.
All right, so that's an interesting approach. Is anyone willing to,
I mean, just so I'm clear though, so that if Mr. Garcia's mother lives in, and family lives in this house, and then that house is sold off, what is left?
What's left is the driveway easement area would be completely removed, restored to lawn, the curb cut would be filled in, and as per the deed restriction, no secondary, that couldn't be then just converted into a circular driveway for the house that's been sold off.
Because at that point, it would be a trespass. If the license were to be revocable, at which point the license that's offered for the servient lot, at which point it's voided or revoked, it would become a trespass to use that as an access point over the other lot.
And they're stipulating that they would restore the property and physically remove the driveway.
Correct.
Okay.
so is anyone bold enough to step forward with try to put this in form of a vote, in essence?
Well, do you want to go through some of the stipulations?
Sure, no, I
before-
think that's where I was headed. In terms of a motion, someone could create a motion that included all these stipulations. It'd be quite a motion.
So, as I understand it, counsel, correctly, that if we include this condition, number one, that this license will be terminable, number two, that the resolution is recorded so that it goes with as a historic record of the property, and also that this deed restriction gets imposed for the circular driveway over, which one is it, 15.01? That at that point, I suppose that the request now for relief includes the original 3 variances for the driveways, because they are now still necessitated as part of the subdivision, right?
Correct. I mean, arguably now they will be variances that will expire in the future, but they are variances nonetheless.
Okay. So with that said,
We would add stipulations with regard to the landscape, maintaining the landscape as currently in place with the landscape plan to accompany the home plans that come, and then the home will look like a 2-story
Stipulate to
home
the elevations.
from the street. That's all the stipulations that I have.
And then, Mr. Chairman, I also had that we agreed there would be no patio setback variance required. We would make it comply, because that was one of them listed as well.
and the.
And we would fix the stone wall encroachment.
Right. And then I have, other ones, consistent with the zoning officials' notes that the plans will reflect the correct tax lots.
Correct. And
That
compliant.
the dry wells that were required as part of the other approval will eventually, their location will be added to the plans if they aren't already.
They're on there already.
They're on there already, okay. We have the landscape and tree removal plan prior to construction. We have full compliance with the reports of our professionals. And then we have this stipulation, which I suppose I'll leave the wordsmithing to, not at the public hearing, but essentially a stipulation that they will make maximum effort for all possible tree retention on property. And then the application itself, the board would be looking to either approve or deny the minor subdivision with the 5 variances. The lot width and lot area for the one lot that's necessitated by the averaging that the ordinance requires, and then the 3 driveway variances that are now back part of the application. There's the parking area issue, there's the design of the driveway, and then there's also the setback from the property line. So it's 5 variances, all requested under the C2 benefits versus detriments criteria.
I think that outlines it pretty well, and so, is someone willing to make a motion based on the stipulations we just heard, motion for approval?
Sure, I'll make a motion to approve the application, subject to those stipulations and the other conditions we've outlined.
Okay, and
Second.
have a second? Okay. Okay, so we have a motion and a second, and Mr. Secretary, if you could go through the roll.
Absolutely. Vice Chairman Zucker?
I'll go, I'm going to say aye. I think he's made enough concessions to satisfy me.
Councilmember O'Sullivan?
Aye.
Mr. Brinkerhoff?
Yes.
Ms. McNeil?
Yes.
Mr. Delory,
Yes.
Mr. Formicelli?
Yes.
And Chairman Anderson.
Yes. All right, thank you all very much.
Thank
We
you very
appreciate
much.
everybody being here tonight, both the public as well as the Mr. Lonzafama and you as well. So, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Thank
bet.
you.
Yeah, I'll work out the wordsmithing with Rosemary.
It's gonna be one hell of a-
It's good, the conditions. Yeah, and I think really be limited, is it'll basically be variances next.
Okay. So we have, we'll wait for the room to clear. Are you here for the Everfast, I'm sorry. Everfast, okay. So up next, we have Everfast Inc.'s hearing on 115 Summit Avenue.
Give me like 2 seconds to get my notes out.
Okay, let's, we need just a minute, we just need a minute for organizing ourselves here.
No, I think, I did something similar for a different resolution a couple years ago. It is what it is.
Trying to do my email.
Oh, man. This is a fun first one for me in this town, though. Good.
Good list. Great job on the Thanks for running through that.
Yeah,
That's always the hardest part.
absolutely.
Stuff in there.
Well, that's why they pay me the big bucks.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. I know, we have old school exhibits, sorry.
Oh, wow, look at that.
So, this one, yep, hopefully I'm not gonna be here at that point.
And before we get started with this application, let me just reflect that I did review the notice and affidavits, and they were served timely and legally sufficient, so the board does have jurisdiction over this application as well.
Thank you. All right, how are we doing? Board members ready to go?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Rock and roll.
Let's go. Okay.
Everfast Group, DBA Calico, ready to go?
Yes,
All right.
okay. So my name is Hillary Alls from the Law Office of Dempsey, Dempsey and Sheehan, representing the applicant Everfast Inc., doing business as Calico. The applicant is the tenant at property located at 115 Summit Avenue in the business zone, block 2608, lot 9. This application is in front of this board because the proposed permitted use by the applicant as a retail design service use and limited retail sales use constitutes a change in use from the prior office use with a different off-street parking standard, and as such, under the ordinance, triggers site plan review. The applicant proposes no changes to the subject property as the site is fully developed, other than interior renovations which have begun with city approval and signage. The relief requested is classification of the site plan, minor site plan approval, and variance relief for off-street parking and loading requirements, and for signage. Specifically, the ordinance requires one space for every 200 square feet of gross floor area. In this case, that would be 17 spaces are required, 8 are existing, and 8 are proposed. One loading space is also required where there has never been a loading space at this site, and none is proposed. The testimony provided tonight will demonstrate that the actual parking demand for Calico's particular design, service, and limited non-traditional retail sales use will be adequately met on site. There is also on-street parking on Summit Avenue and a municipal public parking lot located across from the subject property. The testimony will also demonstrate that a designated loading space is not necessary for the use as proposed by this applicant. And with regard to the signage, only the building sign on the northerly building facade requires a variance. And it should be noted that the ordinance at page D3 references the location provision for which the signage variance is required. In the ordinance, this location provision is in the notes section with regard to the CRBD, NB, and overlay zones, and not in the section related to the business zone. However, the zoning officer has interpreted this provision to apply, recognizing that this requirement is unclear in the ordinance as written and as it relates to the B zone. Further, the prior tenant of the building had signage in a similar location to the sign that the applicant is proposing on the side of the building, and accordingly, we are amending the application to include the sign variance as noted. And I believe that our notice is broad enough to allow that. Jeffrey Hale, a representative of the owner-landlord, is here tonight to provide a history of the site and to describe the site as it currently exists and is proposed to remain. And also here tonight is Supriya Himatsingha, the representative for the applicant, to explain Calico's operations, design services, and limited retail sales use, and the parking demand created by this specific use. So if the board has any questions of me, I'm happy to respond, and if not, I would ask the first witness be called and sworn for testimony.
Any comments, questions from the board? Oh, please go ahead.
Okay. I'd like to call Jeffrey Hale as the first witness. Do you want to? Yeah, that's probably better. If you could state your name and address.
Jeffrey Hale, 5E Heritage Drive, Chatham, New Jersey.
And let me swear him in. Raise your right hand, sir. Do you swear the testimony you're about to give will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth throughout the course of this hearing?
Yes, I do.
Great.
Okay. By whom are you employed?
I'm employed by Subler Management.
And what is the relationship between your employer and the owner and landlord of the property?
Subler Management is the general partner, and it's a captive owner of 115 Summit Avenue.
Okay. And what is your responsibility in connection with your employment?
I'm the Executive Vice President, Director of Leasing, which is a way of saying I'm supposed to rent property out.
And how long have you held this position?
Approximately 25 years.
Okay, and in that capacity and based upon your experience, can you give the board a brief history of the site?
Sure. As far as the site goes, I'm sure everybody's familiar with this building, probably may have walked by it. Single-story structure facing on Summit Avenue, constructed approximately 1955. We actually built this building for Bell Telephone. It was an administrative facility. They were a long-term tenant in the building. Subsequent to that, the Reeves Foundation, which is a local organization, was in the building for quite a long time. After they vacated the property, we leased it to the COCO Collaborative, which was kind of a WeWork environment, which was more of a short-term lease. So it was, again, more of an office use. That lease terminated and we began to market the property. Just a little bit about that in terms of marketing the property. Recognizing that Calico is a very low-traffic tenant, a design studio, no point of sale, no cash and carry, no intensive parking requirements. We thought that was a very good fit and a good marriage for downtown Summit, offering design solutions as well as a low density, low parking requirements.
Sorry, I'm just going to interrupt you real quick. As the director of leasing, are you aware of any parking issues at the site in the
No.
past? Okay. And then if I could ask you to turn your attention to the exhibit boards, A1 and A2, if we could mark them. And if you could tell the board members what these exhibits are.
This particular photograph over here represents the eastern side of the building, where there's 4 parking spaces. Traditionally been employee designated parking areas. On this side of the building, on the other elevation, is where the typical customer parking is along the side of the building.
And just quickly, did you instruct Dempsey, and Sheehan to take these pictures
Yes, I did.
on your behalf? Okay, thank you. Using the survey and exhibits A1 and A2, can you describe for the board the site and the improvements?
As far as the basic building outline is, essentially it's 32 feet wide by 100 feet of the overall dimensions of the building. So it's 3,264 square feet. The site size is approximately 6,200 square feet. It shares a curb cut with the adjacent building, so there is a shared central curb cut into that parking area, which is a shared environment. That is a legacy carryover. It's probably been there for 25 years.
And have you had any issues with that shared driveway?
No, it's a very cooperative environment. Snow plowing is shared, and you know, it's been there for probably 25, 30 years.
And how many total spaces are on the site, parking spaces?
So in terms of the site specifically, there's 4 on the exhibit in the rear of the building, and then 4 on the side for a total of 8. As far as parking in the area, there's fairly robust metered parking right on Summit Avenue with a number of spaces, as well as a public lot across the street.
Has there ever been a designated loading space?
No, not that I'm aware of.
And then if we could just talk about handicap space. Has the landlord made every effort to create as much of a barrier-free space as is readily achievable, given the fact that the site is fully developed?
We have, and both these access points are on grade. There's no slope, there's no steps, there's no barrier to entry to the building. So it's essentially right off the sidewalk space.
But there is no specific designated handicap space.
That's correct.
And can you talk about the site circulation?
Again, it's a shared access point with the adjacent building. And a central curb cut that allows access to the building. It's essentially one way in, one way out.
And then if you could just, I think you just mentioned it, but discuss the surrounding parking to the site.
There's metered parking directly in front of the building, and on either side of the adjacent property. There's additional parking further up 7th Avenue, and then immediately across the street on Summit Avenue, you have the municipal lot, which is a fairly substantial lot. And you also have parking on DeForest Avenue if you're looking for more spaces.
And can you explain to the board how the garbage and recycling collection works?
There's a single, small dumpster located in the rear of the property. It's the intent of the tenant not to really have any garbage disposal. So as far as that goes, the one area that has garbage containers kind of shifted over to the adjacent property owner. He does have room for that on his property line, so it doesn't impede the traffic or the parking access in the back of the building.
Okay, and recognizing that Ms. Himmet-Singo will provide explicit testimony regarding the applicant's proposed use of the property, can you give the board an overview and the reasons that Calico in particular was an appropriate tenant and why that business met the unique context of the site from the owner-landlord's perspective?
As far as the typical use of the building, it's historically been office. This is an as-of-right use right now that is proposed in front of you. In terms of the parking burden, an office user would obviously have a heavier parking burden than actually the requests we're making. And we thought it was a really good fit for the area, for downtown. We were approached by a lot of restaurants, and quite frankly, we didn't think that was a good fit. So we felt the nature of the tenant, specifically design services, only a few employees, by appointment only, no cash and carry, fit really well with downtown Summit. I was born and raised in Summit, I'm just going to throw that out. So we thought it was a really good fit for the area.
Excellent. And have you had an opportunity to review the administrative comments provided by the city's professionals?
Yes, I have.
Specifically in the engineer's review, there's a comment about stormwater management. Can you just clarify for the board what is proposed?
There's no change to the sloping or grading of the site, and it sheet drains to the back of the building. There's an inlet in the rear of the building, so there's no alterations going onto the site. We're not changing the footprint. We're not changing any of the grades or pitches, any of that. So everything is intact and functions properly.
So the stormwater management is to remain as is?
Correct.
Okay. And can you tell the board if there are any changes proposed to the exterior lighting?
Not that I'm currently aware of, no.
I don't have any further questions of the witness.
All right. Any members of the board have questions of the witness? And then maybe we should ask our consultants if they have anything to add to Mr. Hale's testimony. Any questions of Mr. Hale?
I don't.
No? Okay.
Well, my questions actually were just brought up by the applicant. It was noted that there was going to be one ADA space in the application. So is the applicant proposing to provide an ADA space, or were they just saying that the spaces that are there are at grade and ADA accessible?
Yes,
The latter.
the latter.
So
That
you're
they
not
are-
proposing to put
no.
any striping or anything else? Okay.
Do you want to
No.
get our professionals sworn in, Mr. Chair?
Yes, sure, absolutely, yeah.
Do you both swear that the testimony you're about to give or already did give will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right.
Okay.
Any members of the board have any? Oh, sorry, Joe.
No, I assume the next witness is going to talk about number of employees
Yes,
and people.
yes.
Yes.
Operation
Then
and
I
use.
really don't
yes.
have any questions.
Okay, all right. Any members of the board have questions of Mr. Hale?
Okay,
You go to Brayton School, Mr. Hale, or Lincoln School, or what school did you go to?
Franklin,
Franklin, okay.
junior high, Summit High.
Okay,
It's 1978, but I didn't really want to say it. Now it's out
yeah.
there.
Well, I went to Brayton School, let's leave it at that.
Okay.
Okay.
Wilbur Nelson.
All right, so.
Okay, I would
call your
ask that
next
the
witness?
next witness, Supriya Himmat Singha, be called and sworn for testimony.
Okay.
Can you state your name and address for the record, please?
Supriya Matsinka, 1087 Kaolin Road, Kennett Square, Pennsylvania.
Wow, you got to drive home tonight, too?
No, we're going home, we're going to New York.
Okay.
Supria, and last name is Him, A-T for Tom, S-I-N for Nancy, G-K-A.
And ma'am, do you swear that the testimony you're about to give during the course of this hearing will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Great.
By whom are you employed?
As a fast doing businesses, Calico.
And in what capacity are you employed?
VP of Brand and Design.
And are you also a co-owner?
Yes.
And what are your responsibilities in that capacity?
I work with the store operations team, marketing and merchandising, and also involved in relocation of new stores and leases for those stores, and store design as well.
And how long have you held this position?
3 years.
And is this when you purchased the business?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and at that time when you purchased the business, did you evaluate the business model?
Yes, so we evaluated the business model, and we were going to start rebranding, and then COVID happened, so got a little bit delayed, but we were rebranding into design shops instead of fabric shops.
So this is our 5th new model store, and we're offering design services. So it's a one-on-one, personalized custom furnishings design service, and customers come in by appointment, and they look through furniture, fabrics in the store, and then we design it for them based on their requirements.
And in your capacity as Vice President of Brand and Design, are you familiar with the operations of Calico?
Yes.
And are you specifically familiar with the proposed operations at the site in Summit? And can you briefly describe for the board the operations and use proposed for this site?
So it's basically design services for custom home furnishings. It's an interior design service. We help customers design in the store, and we also go out to their homes if it's a larger project.
And so it's an appointment only, mostly appointment only?
Yes, it is appointment only, because appointments, they last from between 30 minutes or sometimes 2 hours, depending on the project for each person. So we need the designer to be available for when the customer comes in.
And are there traditional cash and carry merchandise items available?
Not at the new stores.
Okay. And how many employees are proposed to be at this site at a given time?
At this site, right now we have 2 full-time employees, who's the manager and the product coordinator, and we have 3 part-time designers. So the 3 designers, there's normally 2 on the floor at all times to work, so that we schedule them so that we're open 5 days a week, Tuesday to Saturday, 10 to 5:30. So there's normally 4 people in the store at all times. And depending on the appointments, they're either all in-store or there's some designers who are out at customers' homes.
And can you tell the board Calico's intention with regard to the employee parking?
We were planning to use the 4 spaces in the rear of the building.
Okay. And in your experience and based on other locations at which Calico operates, can you tell the board how many clients are projected to be present at the design center at any given time?
Between 2 and 3 every hour, I would say.
Depending on how many designers?
Depending on, well, yes. I mean, there have to be 2 or 3 designers in the building to take care of the customers who are walking in.
And how long does an appointment usually last?
30 minutes to about 2 hours.
So if there's 2 designers, most likely there's 2 clients, so that would be 4 plus the other 2, so 6 total people on site at one time. And then can you just again go through the retail sales aspect? Is this going to be Short Hills, the Calico
No,
that is in Short Hills?
Short Hills is the older model, so we do sell some fabric on the bolt in Short Hills. It's not a lot of fabric, but we do sell a lot of fabric. Historically, Calico was fabric stores, so we sold fabric in notions, and it's gradually turned away from that. Now this model has nothing to carry out from the store. There's no cash and carry at all.
Was that the old Calico Corners, or is this something
Yes,
different?
that's
Okay.
the old
Okay.
Calico Corners.
And is anything fabricated at this location?
No, it's sent out to local or national workrooms.
Okay. And is there a high volume of walk-ins?
No, customers will come in to browse sometimes, and either we make an appointment for them if a designer is not available to work with them, or if a designer is available, then they will work with them.
And then can you just explain to the board how deliveries are handled?
We normally have FedEx, the regular FedEx deliveries every day, and a customer might come in with a pillow or 2 or a cushion sample or something, but there's not really anything big that's delivered into the stores. They normally go straight to the customer's home.
And the frequency of deliveries?
FedEx comes in once a day.
Okay, and people, again, they're not coming to pick up furniture or no box trucks dropping furniture off, things like that?
No, that's normally delivered straight to the customer. It's scheduled and delivered to them to make sure they're home.
And does Calico have any intention of having any commercial vehicles stored at the site overnight? Okay. Now that you've described the operations and use, can you tell the board what improvements Calico has made or will be making to the subject property?
All the improvements are really inside the building. So we have our racks that we use to display our fabric swatches. We have furniture on the floor to show room settings for the customers that walk in.
and there's an office which has the 2 bathrooms that are by code, and there's desks in the back in the office space.
Are you proposing any exterior changes?
No, none. The signage has been approved.
What, no,
It's in the process of being approved.
right. And are you proposing any change to the lighting outside? Okay, so with regard to the signage, can you describe the signage that you are proposing on site?
So the front of the building, which is the one on Summit Avenue, is going to have a black awning with calico written on it. And then the side of the building, which is facing north,
I'm just going to interrupt you. It's going to have calico design and shop.
design plus shop.
Yeah.
And then on the side of the store, which is facing north, the wall facing north, will also have calico design plus shop. But it's not an awning, it's just right on the wall. And then there's a plain black awning on the side entrance, just a small black awning.
And can you tell the board the purpose of having 2 signs, one on the front of the building and one on the northerly side of the building?
It's just for visibility. If someone's driving up Summit Avenue, they'd be able to see the side of the building. And if they're driving south, they could see it on the wall. And if they're driving north, they'd pass by the big awning.
So to make the business more easily identifiable for motorists driving by.
And also to show the parking, the parking that belongs to Calico. That's where the sign is on that wall.
And did Calico design the proposed signage to meet the intent and purpose of the city's sign ordinance by having a coordinated design theme that's aesthetically pleasing and which provides easy identification of the business and parking area to pedestrians and motorists from all directions to the site? With regard to the front awning facing Summit Avenue, can you tell the board how far that awning projects from the building?
14 inches.
And will this awning encroach into the city's right-of-way?
No, because the building is set back 2.5 feet, so the 14 inches shouldn't be in the way.
Okay. And is Calico proposing any other exterior improvements or any modifications to the parking area? And with regard to trash and recycling, can you tell the board where the trash and recycling will be stored prior to collection?
It's going to just be inside the building. We don't have too much trash or recycling.
So the nature of your use does not generate much trash and recycling. And as a condition of approval, do you agree to comply with any city ordinances or regulations with regard to the trash and recycling? Okay. I don't have any more questions.
Yeah. Members of the board have questions for this witness? Yep. John?
That's just maybe a question for actually the property manager, but do you ever have a problem with people parking along the side of your building and not realizing it's your property, taking up your spaces?
Mr. Hill, I would ask
Yeah, Mr.
him
Hill?
to answer that question.
Off hours or?
Well, anytime, because I know it's, people don't always know which lot belongs to which store and what they're allowed, where they're.
No, we've never had any historical problems with that.
All right. I just wanted to know if you wanted to put up signing that said this is reserved for the business. If you don't need to.
We could certainly put signs up to that effect, no, it wouldn't be a problem.
I would just want to say that I know Summit has kind of branded itself as a center for home design and decor boutique, so I think it's a welcome addition to town and very appropriate.
We were very happy to find the space in Summit. It was, for us, a perfect fit.
I have no further questions.
Any other board members have any questions of this applicant? And with regard to our board professionals, any questions of the applicant?
No, based on the questions, I think I'm impressed that somebody's finally read my memo.
Yeah.
No problem.
Yeah, okay.
I would just
Chris,
add that.
any questions, any thoughts? Okay.
I would just add that if they are going to propose additional signage, that, it should comply with our ordinances such that they don't have to come back for another sign variance. Put that perhaps as a condition.
I think there would be a variance required, right? Given
There
where you
is
are
a
today.
variance required for the one sign.
Right, but I'm saying if you're going to mark designated, and maybe you're, would there be any additional ordinances, let's say that they decide to put up a sign demarcating the specific parking? I just want to make sure that that wouldn't necessitate another variance.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, I've seen some boards say that if it's the board that has asked for something that results in a nonconformity, it's one thing. If it's the applicant asking for it, then clearly it's a variance.
Oh, interesting.
I'm not sure what the practice here is.
Well, I'm not sure, do you need it?
I
guess,
don't
is the
think,
question.
based on what Mr. Hale said, it's necessary.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
And the only other comment I can offer is, and I agree with Mr. Hale, if the building were occupied for office, continued to be occupied for office use, from a technical perspective, it would generate a lot greater parking demand than what's been testified to here.
Yeah, I think that's right. I guess one of the questions I would have would be, would you be willing to mark out a handicap designated space? Or does that create too many issues with regard to enough parking for others? Or it just seems a little unusual
I'm not
that there's
sure
no...
we could make one that would meet all of the requirements.
Because of the width and the door swinging and all that stuff.
The location of the building.
Yeah, I guess I understand that. Now that I think about what the physical dimensions of that thing looks like, it might be very difficult to actually create one.
Right, and there is handicap spaces in the municipal lot across the street.
All right. Any other questions for the board members?
Just is black and blue terrible? Pardon my indulgence.
Yeah, please. All right. Shall I have a motion to approve the application?
So moved?
And a second?
Second.
I moved.
Mr. Zucker? And a second came from... Yep. From Paul. All right, and roll call?
Yes, Vice Chairman Zucker?
Aye.
Councilmember O'Sullivan?
Aye.
Mr. Brinkerhoff?
Yes.
Ms. McNeil?
Yes.
Mr. Delory,
Yes.
Mr. Formicelli?
Yes.
And Chairman Anderson.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it, and thank you for
very much.
staying to hear our application tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you for your patience.
Sorry to keep you so long.
I think for C variances, lay testing.
Do we need to do this?
Homeowners come into Board of Adjustment.
Okay, we have two more items of business here tonight as a board before we can go home. We have, Chris put on your, at your place, the extension, removal, the change, whatever you want to call it, for a new law firm where Steve is currently hanging his hat. So this is something that the board needs to approve, I guess, Chris? Or is it just
Yeah, so
something that,
basically what the resolution is stipulating is that you're terminating the contract that was previously awarded to Venterma, which Keough and Warner from yesterday's date, and then awarding to the new firm, which Steve has moved to, effective as of today. So if nobody has any objections, we would need a motion to do so.
so moved. He doesn't know addresses. Yeah, all right. So there was a question about the addresses, whether addresses of the two firms needed to be in this resolution, but I'm not sure that we do. The firm,
The address should be in there from Somerville.
oh yeah, down, farther down, I see, okay, I got you, okay, great, thanks. All right.
No problem.
All right, so we need a vote on that.
Correct, so we have a motion from Mr. Brinkerhoff, and does anyone have a second?
Second? Is the second?
Second.
All right.
All right, and I guess just to be overly cautious, we'll do a roll call. All right.
Would appreciate that.
I think you would, right? All right, Chairman Anderson.
Yes.
Vice Chairman Zucker?
Yes.
Councilmember O'Sullivan?
Aye.
Mr. Brinkerhoff?
Yes.
Ms. McNeil?
Yes.
Mr. Delory, and Mr. Formicelli.
Yes.
And Joe and Chris, I'm sorry, I should have let you guys go, unless there's anything else that you need to to talk about. Thank you very much for staying so late. Sorry. Yeah,
night.
see you
Nice
later.
to meet both of you.
Thank you.
And then
Then we've got the resolution for dismissal for 43 Woodland.
yeah, this has finally made it here. This was kind of a few months ago, and we just hadn't met. So this is formalizing the request to withdraw the application from Mr. Maynor. So, same deal.
Without prejudice?
Correct. Thank you. So we need a motion for that.
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All right, Mr. Brinkerhoff, second, okay.
All right, and we'll do another roll call. So Chairman Anderson,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Zucker,
Yes.
Councilmember O'Sullivan,
Aye.
Mr. Brinkerhoff,
Yes.
Ms. McNeil,
Yes.
Mr. Delory,
Yes.
and Mr. Formicelli.
Yes.
All right.
All right, thanks, everyone. All right, so we're adjourned for tonight. As far as next month, I'm not sure we're 100% determined whether we need a meeting in August. I think we're going to try to perhaps not have an August meeting.
Yeah, I think since we heard these two, we're probably in decent shape, but it's kind of up in the air about if we're redoing the audio in August or not.
Okay.
So, stay tuned.
All right, so at this point, we'll say stay tuned for August, but at this point, the second page of your agenda says next meeting, September
Is
26th.
that the 20, it's late August, right, the Monday?
Yeah, it's always the fourth Monday. of the
Got
month.
it.
So it's right in the middle of your Labor Day weekend.
Perfect.
Anyway, we're at this point,
Well,
assuming that there's no
I'm
meeting.
stuck here with high school sports,
Yeah,
so.
right.
And Chairman Anderson, thank
Yes.
you for navigating us through COVID. This is our first.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
How about that? We're all back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ship and those borders was not easy, so.
Well, could you imagine how much fun we would have had it with Primrose? If
Oh,
that
my
had been in
gosh.
person, you know?
I wonder if many people would have showed up for Primrose.
No, they would not have.
Yeah,
You wouldn't have had 100 people on.
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
It would have been less, I think, yeah.
Yeah,
All right.
Definitely more objectors for virtual meetings.
Yeah.
definitely.
Seems that way, doesn't it?
No question.
There's no question. Yeah.
Make sure Jay's over there.
Chris, do you need, or? Thanks, everybody. Sorry to keep you hanging out. I was at Parsippany for 45 minutes.
Oh, no.
Oh, my God.
We sent that whole.
Oh.
You
So
don't have
the
any
email
name on
afterwards
your
had
agenda.
the agenda.
There's no name of your
everything else.
city or town on your agenda.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean electronic?